The elevator doors slid open on the executive floor at exactly 7:47 a.m., and Daniel Carter stepped into the corridor that would change his life forever. He clutched the revised quarterly projections in one hand, his daughter's goodbye kiss still warm on his cheek, completely unaware that in 90 seconds he would witness something that would shatter every assumption he'd ever made about power, success, and the woman who held his career in her hands. The door to Victoria Hale's private office stood slightly ajar. An invitation or a trap. He knocked twice. No answer. He pushed it open. And there, behind the mahogany desk where billion-dollar decisions were made, sat the most feared CEO in the industry, head buried in her arms, shoulders trembling with silent, desperate tears. Before we begin, I want to invite you on this journey with me. Stay until the end to see how two broken people find their way back to living. And please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Daniel Carter had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. At 32, he'd perfected the art of being present without being seen. The employee who arrived early, left late, never complained, never drew attention. In the glass tower of Meridian Capital, where ambition wore $1,000 suits and ruthlessness disguised itself as strategy, Daniel existed in the margins. He was the data analyst who made other people's presentations shine, the quiet voice in meetings that senior executives often forgot had spoken, the devoted single father who slipped out at 5:30 on the dot because daycare closed at 6 and Lily couldn't wait. Most people didn't notice Daniel Carter, and that was exactly how he designed it. The morning of March 15th began like every other, alarm at 5:30 a.m., the familiar weight of exhaustion settling over him before his eyes even opened. In the small bedroom down the hall, Lily slept with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, her dark curls spread across the pillow like her mother's used to be. Daniel paused in her doorway, as he did every morning, just watching her breathe. She was 6 now. Sarah had been gone for 3 years. Sometimes Daniel couldn't remember what his wife's voice sounded like anymore, and the guilt of that forgetting felt like swallowing glass. "Daddy?" Lily's eyes fluttered open, finding him instantly. "Hey, sweetheart." He crossed to her bed, knelt down. "Did I wake you?" "No, I was dreaming about Mom again." She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it broke something in him every time. "She was teaching me to make pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips." Daniel swallowed hard. "Those were her favorite." "I know. Can we make them this weekend?" "Absolutely." He kissed her forehead. "But today, we've got to hustle. Big day for Daddy at work." Lily sat up, suddenly alert. "The presentation thing?" "The presentation thing," he confirmed. "If it goes well, maybe we can finally afford that trip to the aquarium you've been asking about." "The one with the sharks?" "The one with the sharks." She threw her small arms around his neck, and Daniel held on perhaps a moment too long, drawing strength from her certainty, her uncomplicated love. When had he become the child seeking comfort from his daughter? When had their roles reversed so completely? The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency: cereal, clothes, backpack check, the walk to the corner where Mrs. Chen waited with her cheerful daycare van. Lily kissed his cheek, leaving a sticky residue of strawberry jam, and clambered inside. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you more, Lilybug." The van pulled away and Daniel stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching it disappear into traffic. Then he turned toward the subway station, toward the gleaming tower downtown, toward another day of being invisible. Except today, he wouldn't be invisible at all. Meridian Capital occupied floors 40 through 52 of the Whitmore Building, a glass and steel monument to corporate ambition that dominated the financial district skyline. Daniel's cubicle sat on 43, strategically positioned near the back corner where natural light barely penetrated and the hum of the HVAC system provided constant white noise. His colleagues, ambitious 20-somethings who saw Meridian as a stepping stone to something greater, often worked with headphones on, isolated in their private worlds of spreadsheets and market analysis. Daniel preferred the quiet. It gave him space to think, to work, to exist without performance. "Carter." The voice cut through his concentration at 7:15 a.m. Marcus Webb, senior analyst and Daniel's nominal supervisor, stood beside his cubicle with a stack of folders. "Conference room, now." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Is there a problem?" "Victoria wants the quarterly projections updated. Apparently the numbers from yesterday's preliminary report don't match her expectations." Victoria Hale. Even her name carried weight at Meridian Capital. At 41, she'd built her reputation on two things: brilliant strategy and absolute intolerance for mediocrity. She'd taken Meridian from a mid-tier investment firm to a powerhouse in less than a decade, primarily by being smarter, more ruthless, and more demanding than anyone else in the room. Employees either worshipped her or feared her, and sometimes both simultaneously. Daniel had met her exactly 3 times. Each encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. He doubted she even knew his name. "The projections were triple-checked," Daniel said carefully. "What specifically doesn't match?" Marcus shrugged. "Above my pay grade. She wants them revised before the board meeting at 9. "That means you've got 90 minutes. 90 minutes to revise an entire quarter's worth of—" "Carter." Marcus's expression hardened. "Victoria Hale doesn't make requests. She gives instructions. You want to argue with her about timeline? Be my guest. But I wouldn't recommend it." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll handle it." "Smart man." Marcus dropped the folders on his desk. "Updated parameters are in there. And Carter, don't screw this up. Victoria's in a mood today." He walked away, leaving Daniel staring at the folders with a creeping sense of dread. 90 minutes. He opened the first folder, scanning the new parameters, and his dread crystallized into something sharper. These weren't minor adjustments. Victoria had fundamentally restructured the entire projection model. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Lily forgot her lunch. Can you drop it off?" Daniel closed his eyes. The lunch sat in their refrigerator, meticulously prepared last night. Turkey sandwich with the crust cut off, apple slices, the juice box Lily preferred. He'd forgotten to grab it in the morning rush. "Can't get away," he typed back. "Can you—" "Already on it," Mrs. Chen responded. "Don't worry. Focus on work." The guilt settled in his chest like a stone. Even with all his careful planning, all his systems and routines, he still failed. Still forgot. Still couldn't quite manage to be both the father Lily needed and the employee Meridian demanded. Daniel set his phone aside and opened his laptop. 90 minutes. He got to work. By 7:40 a.m., he'd rebuilt the foundation of the projection model. By 8:10, he'd integrated the new parameters and was running preliminary scenarios. The numbers told a story Victoria clearly wanted to present to the board: aggressive growth in emerging markets, strategic repositioning of underperforming assets, a calculated risk that could either cement Meridian's dominance or expose them to significant losses. It was brilliant, dangerous, but brilliant. Daniel's fingers flew across the keyboard, refining calculations, double-checking assumptions. Around him, the office filled with the sounds of a workday beginning, conversations at the coffee maker, keyboards clicking, the occasional laugh. He barely noticed. When he worked like this, the world narrowed to numbers and logic, problems and solutions. It was the only time his mind quieted completely. The only time he wasn't thinking about Sarah or Lily or the impossible balance he couldn't quite maintain. At 8:45, he finished. Daniel printed the revised report, collated the pages, and slipped them into a presentation folder. Then he stood, straightened his tie, a navy blue one Sarah had bought him years ago, slightly frayed at the edges but still his favorite, and headed for the elevator. The executive floor occupied the 52nd story. Daniel had been up there exactly twice before, both times to deliver documents to Victoria's assistant. The elevator rose smoothly, silently, and when the doors opened, he stepped into a different world. Everything here was designed to communicate power. The reception area featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern art that probably cost more than Daniel's annual salary, furniture that looked beautiful but uncomfortable. Even the air felt different up here, cooler, quieter, rarefied. Victoria's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Jennifer, normally sat at the curved desk near the corner office. This morning, her chair was empty. The entire floor seemed deserted, actually, which struck Daniel as odd. On a board meeting day, he'd expected chaos, last-minute preparations, executives rushing between offices. Instead, silence. Daniel approached the corner office. Victoria's domain. The door stood slightly ajar, unusual for a woman who reportedly guarded her privacy like a state secret. He could see a sliver of the interior, dark wood paneling, a wall of books, the edge of that famous mahogany desk where, according to company legend, Victoria had once made a hedge fund manager cry during a negotiation. He knocked twice. "Ms. Hale, I have the revised projections." No response. Daniel hesitated. Protocol said to leave documents with Jennifer, but Jennifer wasn't here, and the board meeting started in 15 minutes. If Victoria didn't have these numbers, she'd be walking into that meeting unprepared. And from everything Daniel had heard, Victoria Hale never walked into anything unprepared. He knocked again, louder this time. "Ms. Hale?" Still nothing. Daniel checked his watch. 7:47 a.m. Maybe she'd stepped out, just for a moment. Maybe he should wait. But the rational part of his brain argued that leaving the documents on her desk made more sense than standing in the hallway like an idiot. He pushed the door open. "Ms. Hale, I'm just going to leave these..." And then he saw her. Victoria Hale sat behind her desk, her head buried in her arms, her entire body shaking. The sound reached him a moment later, not loud sobs, but something worse. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind that couldn't be contained or controlled no matter how hard you tried. Daniel froze. This was Victoria Hale. The woman who'd faced down hostile takeovers without flinching, who'd fired executives with such surgical precision that they thanked her for the experience, who'd built an empire on the foundation of being harder, colder, more unshakable than anyone else. And she was falling apart in her office at 7:47 on a Thursday morning. "Run!" Every instinct screamed. "Leave the documents and run. Pretend you never saw this." But Daniel's feet wouldn't move, because he recognized that sound. He'd made that sound himself, late at night after Lily fell asleep, when the weight of everything became too much and the walls he'd built around his grief finally crumbled. Victoria's hand moved, reaching for something on the desk. A pill bottle. She fumbled with the cap, her fingers shaking so badly she couldn't grip it properly. The bottle slipped, rolled, fell to the floor with a hollow rattle. Daniel moved without thinking. He crossed the office, picked up the bottle, and set it gently on the desk. Victoria's head snapped up. Her face was a revelation. Not the composed mask he'd seen in company presentations. Not the cold authority from executive meetings. This was raw and human and utterly devastated. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her eyes, ice blue, he noticed for the first time, were red-rimmed and wild with panic. "Get out!" Her voice cracked on the words. "Get the hell out of my office!" Daniel stepped back, hands raised. "I'm sorry. I knocked. I didn't mean to. I said, get out!" But even as she screamed it, her hand was still reaching for the pill bottle, still shaking. Daniel's eyes dropped to the label. Anxiety medication. Prescription dated 2 weeks ago. Understanding crashed over him. Not weakness, not a breakdown in the conventional sense, a panic attack. He'd watched Sarah have them, near the end. He knew the signs, the hyperventilation, the trembling, the desperate animal terror that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with brain chemistry, betraying you at the worst possible moment. "Ms. Hale," Daniel said quietly, keeping his voice steady. "I'm going to step outside and close the door. But first, I need to know, do you want me to call someone, a doctor, your assistant?" "No!" The word came out sharp, desperate. "No one can know about this. No one. If anyone finds out, if the board..." She pressed her palms to her temples. "You don't understand. I can't afford to be weak. Not now. Not ever." "This isn't weakness," Daniel said. It's just chemistry. Your brain's overreacting to perceived threat. It happens." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "You think you understand? You think..." She stopped, really looking at him for the first time. "Who are you?" "Daniel Carter. Data analysis. I have your revised projections." "Daniel..." She said the name slowly, as if trying to place it. "You're the one who fixed the Henderson account discrepancy last month." He was absurdly pleased that she knew that. "Yes, ma'am. And now you've seen me having a breakdown before the most important board meeting of the quarter." She grabbed the pill bottle, managed to open it this time, shook 2 tablets into her palm. Perfect. Just perfect. Daniel watched her swallow the medication dry. Then, Before his better judgment could stop him, he said, "The meeting doesn't start for 13 minutes. If you take slow breaths, in through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through your mouth for 8. The medication will start working faster. The breathing tricks your nervous system into thinking you're calm." Victoria stared at him. "You're giving me medical advice?" "No, I'm sharing what helped my wife." The words came out before he could censor them. "She had panic attacks, especially near the end." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not softness exactly, more like recognition. "The end?" "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Finally, Victoria nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Close the door, from the inside." Daniel hesitated. "Ms. Hale, that wasn't a request, Mr. Carter. Close the door and sit down. We need to talk." He did as instructed, settling into one of the leather chairs across from her desk. Up close, he could see the careful construction of her professional persona, the tailored suit, the minimal jewelry, the hair pulled back in a style that suggested control, but her hands still trembled slightly as she set them flat on the desk, and her breathing remained too fast, too shallow. 4 counts in, Daniel said softly. "Through your nose." Victoria glared at him. Then, surprisingly, she closed her eyes and breathed in, held, released. They sat like that for maybe 2 minutes, Daniel watching her fight for composure. Victoria following the breathing pattern with the grim determination of someone who approached panic attacks the same way she approached hostile negotiations, as a problem to be solved through sheer force of will. Gradually, her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. When she opened her eyes again, they were clearer, more focused. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. 4 years. "And in 4 years, I never knew you existed." It wasn't a question, so Daniel didn't answer. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him with the intensity that had probably made countless executives squirm. "You understand what you've seen here stays completely confidential. If anyone learns about this, anyone at all, I will destroy your career so thoroughly you'll never work in this industry again." Daniel met her gaze steadily. "I understand." "Do you?" She leaned forward. "Because I need you to understand the stakes. This company, this position, I've sacrificed everything to build it. My personal life, my relationships, my health, all of it. And if the board thinks for 1 second that I'm unstable, unreliable, that I can't handle the pressure..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "I won't say anything," Daniel said simply. "You have my word. The word of a man I don't know, a man who could leverage this moment for any number of personal advantages." "I could," Daniel acknowledged, "but I won't." "Why not?" It was a fair question. Daniel thought about it, really thought about it. "Because we're all barely holding it together," he finally said. "Some of us are just better at hiding it than others. And because I know what it's like to feel like you can't show weakness, can't break down, can't be anything less than perfect because people depend on you." He paused. "I have a 6-year-old daughter. She lost her mother. If I fall apart, there's no one to catch her. So I understand the weight of always having to be strong." Victoria's expression didn't soften exactly, but something in her eyes changed. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, of unexpected kinship. "Your wife," she said quietly. "What was her name?" "Sarah." "And your daughter?" "Lily." Victoria nodded slowly. Then she stood, moved to the window, and looked out at the city spread below them. When she spoke again, her voice had regained some of its usual authority. "The board meeting is in 11 minutes. I need to be in that conference room, completely in control, presenting those projections with absolute confidence." She turned back to face him. "Can you help me get there?" Daniel stood as well. "What do you need?" "Talk to me about the numbers, walk me through the revisions, give me something concrete to focus on." So he did. Standing there in her office, with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the medication slowly taking effect, Daniel explained the projection model, the parameters she'd requested, the scenarios he'd built out. He kept his voice steady, factual, grounding, and Victoria listened with complete attention, her brilliant mind engaging with the data, pushing aside the panic to focus on what she did best. By the time Jennifer appeared at the door at 8:56, looking rushed and apologetic, Victoria was completely composed. The transformation was remarkable, from broken to powerful in less than 10 minutes. If Daniel hadn't seen it himself, he never would have believed the vulnerability he'd witnessed. "The board is gathering," Jennifer said. "You needed these final projections?" Victoria picked up the folder from her desk. "Mr. Carter already delivered them. Excellent work, by the way," she added, looking at Daniel. "Very thorough." "Thank you, ma'am." "Jennifer, make sure Mr. Carter receives appropriate compensation for the rush job. Time and a half seems fair." Jennifer made a note. "Of course." Victoria moved toward the door, and Daniel stepped aside to let her pass. She paused beside him, so close he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly, pitched low enough that Jennifer couldn't hear, "we'll speak again, soon." It wasn't a request. It was a promise. Or possibly a threat. Then she was gone, striding down the hallway toward the conference room with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted herself for a moment. Jennifer hurried after her, leaving Daniel alone in the office. He stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then he picked up his now empty folder and headed back to the elevator, back to his cubicle, back to the comfortable invisibility he'd cultivated so carefully. Except nothing felt comfortable anymore. The rest of the morning passed in a strange fog. Daniel returned to his desk, fielded questions from Marcus about the revision timeline, accepted congratulations from colleagues who'd heard about the rush job. He worked through his regular assignments, answered emails, attended a standing meeting about resource allocation. But his mind kept circling back to those moments in Victoria's office, to the raw vulnerability he'd witnessed, to the fear in her voice when she'd said, "No one can know about this." What had driven Victoria Hale, the most powerful woman at Meridian Capital, possibly the most powerful woman in their entire industry, to that breaking point? What pressures was she carrying that no one else saw? At noon, Daniel's phone rang, an internal number he didn't recognize. "Daniel Carter." "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Reeves, Ms. Hale's executive assistant. She'd like to see you in her office at 4 o'clock this afternoon." Daniel's stomach tightened. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "She didn't specify. Should I confirm your attendance?" What was he supposed to say? No? "Yes, 4 o'clock. I'll be there." "Excellent. Please arrive promptly." The line went dead. Daniel set his phone down and stared at his computer screen without seeing it. 4 o'clock. 5 hours away. 5 hours to wonder what Victoria wanted, what she planned to say, whether his career was about to implode spectacularly. Marcus appeared at his cubicle at 12:45. "Heard you have a meeting with Victoria this afternoon." News traveled fast. "Apparently." "Any idea what it's about?" "None." Marcus studied him carefully. "People don't usually get called to her office unless they're being promoted or fired, and she doesn't typically promote data analysts." Daniel forced a smile. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." "Just being realistic." Marcus shrugged. "Though I will say, she seemed pleased with your work this morning, so maybe you're getting a commendation, or a raise. Or she was planning exactly how to eliminate the one person who'd seen her weakness," Daniel thought. But he didn't say it aloud. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. At 2:30, Daniel called Mrs. Chen to let her know he might be late picking up Lily. At 3:15, he went to the bathroom and stared at himself in the mirror, trying to see what Victoria had seen. An invisible man, a grieving widower, someone who understood the weight of maintaining composure when everything inside was falling apart. At 3:55, he took the elevator to the 52nd floor. Jennifer looked up when he approached her desk. "Mr. Carter, right on time. Please go in. She's expecting you." Daniel knocked once and entered. Victoria's office looked different in the afternoon light, warmer somehow, though no less imposing. She sat behind her desk, perfectly composed, reviewing something on her computer. When he entered, she looked up and gestured to the chairs across from her. "Close the door and sit down, Mr. Carter." He did. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "I owe you an apology." Of all the things Daniel had expected, that wasn't one of them. "Ma'am?" "This morning, I threatened you, told you I'd destroy your career if you spoke about what you'd seen. That was inappropriate." She paused. "It was also unfair." You did nothing wrong. I was the one who lost control. You were having a medical episode, Daniel said quietly. That's not the same as losing control. Isn't it? Victoria's smile was bitter. In my world, any sign of vulnerability is fatal. The board, the investors, even my own executive team, they're all waiting for evidence that I'm not up to this job, that a woman can't handle the pressure. One panic attack, one moment of visible weakness, and everything I've built comes crashing down. Daniel chose his words carefully. With respect, Ms. Hale, I think you underestimate people. Most would see someone working through a medical condition as strength, not weakness. Most people aren't circling sharks looking for blood in the water. She stood, moved to the window again. It seemed to be a habit when she needed to think. I've been having these attacks for 6 months. They started after the Donovan merger. You remember that? The hostile takeover attempt. You fought them off. Barely. It took everything I had, and somewhere in the middle of that fight, my body decided it had had enough. She turned back to face him. The medication helps, usually. But this morning, she trailed off. What was different this morning? Victoria hesitated, and Daniel saw the calculation in her eyes. How much to reveal? How much to trust? Finally, she said, My mother called last night. She's in a care facility, advanced Alzheimer's. Most days she doesn't recognize me. But yesterday she had a moment of clarity. She looked at me and said, You've become exactly what I was afraid you'd become. Successful and completely alone. The words hung in the air between them. I'm sorry, Daniel said, and meant it. Don't be. She was right. Victoria returned to her desk, sat down with the careful control of someone who'd learned to contain every movement, every gesture. I'm 41 years old. I have no spouse, no children, no meaningful relationships outside of work. I've spent 2 decades building an empire, and for what? So I can die alone in some expensive care facility while my assistant handles the arrangements? Daniel didn't know what to say to that. What could he say? Victoria seemed to shake herself. I'm not telling you this to elicit sympathy, Mr. Carter. I'm telling you because I need you to understand something. What you saw this morning, that's my secret, my vulnerability, my weakness, and I'm trusting you with it. Why? The question escaped before Daniel could stop it. Because you have secrets too. Because you understand the cost of always being strong. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because I looked you up after this morning, your personnel file, your work history, and I saw that you've been passed over for promotion 3 times in 4 years despite consistently excellent performance reviews. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd known, of course, but hearing it said aloud still stung. Do you know why? Victoria asked. I assume it's because I don't stay late, don't socialize with the team, don't play the political games necessary for advancement. Partially, but mostly it's because you're invisible. You've made yourself so unremarkable that people forget you exist. She leaned forward. That's a waste, Mr. Carter. You're brilliant with data, you work harder than half my executive team, and you have insights that could be genuinely valuable. But you've decided that invisibility is safer than being seen. Invisibility is safer, Daniel said quietly. I have responsibilities. I can't afford to take risks. Can you afford to stay where you are? Victoria countered. Working yourself to exhaustion for a salary that barely covers childcare and rent? Never advancing because advancement requires visibility? She was right, and Daniel hated that she was right. I'm going to make you an offer, Victoria said, and I want you to think very carefully before you respond. Daniel waited. I need someone I can trust. Someone discreet, competent, and without personal ambition that might conflict with my interests. Someone who won't use my vulnerability against me, but who also won't handle me with kid gloves. She paused. I'm creating a new position, special analyst to the CEO. You'd report directly to me, work on high-level strategic projects, have access to information most executives never see. The salary would be triple your current compensation. Daniel's mouth went dry. Ms. Hale, before you answer, understand what I'm actually offering. This isn't charity. I'm buying your silence with opportunity. I'm leveraging your need for security against my need for someone I can trust. Her blue eyes were sharp, honest. It's a transaction, a mutually beneficial arrangement, nothing more. But it felt like more. It felt like Victoria Hale was offering him a lifeline and asking for one in return. "What would happen," Daniel said slowly, "if I said no?" "Then you go back to your desk. We never speak of this morning again, and your career continues exactly as it has been. I won't retaliate. I won't punish you. You have my word." "And if I say yes, then your life changes significantly. You'll have more money, more responsibility, more pressure. You'll be visible in ways you've spent 4 years avoiding, and you'll be connected to me, which means if I fall, there's a good chance you fall too." It was an honest assessment. Daniel appreciated that. He thought about Lily, about the aquarium trip he couldn't afford, about the fact that her shoes were getting too small and he'd been putting off buying new ones, about the scholarship fund for college that remained empty because there was never enough left over at the end of the month. He thought about Sarah, about the promises he'd made at her bedside. Take care of Lily. Be happy. Live. Really live. Don't just survive. He thought about the man he'd been 4 years ago, before grief had taught him that invisibility was safer than being seen, before he'd learned to make himself small. "I need to pick up my daughter," Daniel said. "Can I give you my answer tomorrow?" Victoria smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Of course. Take all the time you need, Mr. Carter." Daniel stood, then hesitated at the door. "Miss Hale, for what it's worth, your mother was wrong." "About what?" "You're not alone. You're just very good at pretending you don't need anyone. There's a difference." He left before she could respond. That evening, after Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Daniel sat at their small kitchen table and made lists. Pros and cons. Risks and benefits. The rational approach to an irrational decision. But rationality had its limits, because what Victoria was really offering wasn't just a job, it was a chance to step out of the shadows, to use his skills for something that mattered, to provide the life he wanted for Lily instead of the life they could barely afford. And yes, it was risky. Yes. It tied him to a woman whose vulnerability made her dangerous. Yes, it meant abandoning the safety of invisibility. But Sarah's voice whispered in his memory, "Live, Danny. Really live." At midnight, Daniel sent an email to Victoria's assistant. "Please inform Ms. Hale that my answer is yes." Then he closed his laptop and went to bed, knowing that when he woke up, everything would be different. He had no idea how different, or how quickly everything he thought he understood about Victoria Hale, about Meridian Capital, and about the secrets powerful people kept would begin to unravel. The email notification chimed at 6:47 a.m., pulling Daniel from restless sleep. He reached for his phone, squinting at the screen in the pre-dawn darkness. Jennifer Reeves had responded with characteristic efficiency. "Ms. Hale has been informed. Please report to her office at 8 a.m. sharp for onboarding. Congratulations on your new position." Daniel lay back against the pillow, his heart hammering. 24 hours ago, he'd been invisible. Now he was walking into the center of a storm he didn't fully understand, bound to a woman whose secrets could destroy them both. "Daddy?" Lily appeared in his doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Why are you awake? It's still dark." "Just thinking, sweetheart." He sat up, making room for her on the bed. She climbed in beside him, warm and sleep-soft. "Big day at work." "The presentation went good?" "Really good. So good that I got a new job." Lily's eyes widened. "A new job? Do you have to leave?" No. Same company, just different work. Better work. And it means more money, which means maybe we can do some of those things we've been wanting to do." "Like the aquarium?" "Like the aquarium. And maybe some new shoes for you, since I noticed you've been cramming your feet into those sneakers." Lily giggled, wiggling her toes under the blanket. "They're only a little too small." "Uh-huh. We'll get you new ones this weekend." Daniel pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "You know I love you, right? More than anything in the whole world?" "I know, Daddy. I love you too." She tilted her head back to look at him. "Are you scared about the new job?" Sometimes her perceptiveness startled him. "A little bit, yeah." "That's okay. Mom used to say being scared means you're doing something brave." Daniel's throat tightened. She was right. She was right about a lot of things. They sat together in the quiet darkness for a few more minutes, and Daniel tried to memorize the moment, The weight of his daughter against his side, the trust in her sleepy voice, the simple peace of being needed. Whatever happened next, whatever complications his decision brought, he was doing this for her, for the life she deserved. At 7:15, he dropped Lily at daycare, her new lunch safely in hand this time. Mrs. Chen noticed the nervousness he couldn't quite hide. "Big day?" she asked in her gentle way. "Big day," Daniel confirmed. "I got promoted. New position." "That's wonderful. Lily must be so proud." "She's excited about the aquarium." Daniel smiled despite his nerves. "Mrs. Chen, if things get complicated at work, if my hours change or I need backup..." "Daniel," she put a hand on his arm. "We take care of each other. That's what community means. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out." The kindness steadied him. He thanked her and headed for the subway, for the gleaming tower, for the executive floor, and whatever waited there. Jennifer was at her desk when he arrived at 7:55, looking crisp and professional despite the early hour. She handed him a folder, thick with documents. Employment contract, non-disclosure agreement, benefits package, security clearance forms, she said briskly. "You'll need to review and sign everything today. Ms. Hale is expecting you at 8. Daniel glanced at the NDA, which was substantially longer and more detailed than the standard employee agreement. Phrases jumped out: confidential strategic information, proprietary data, severe penalties for breach of trust. He was signing away his right to speak about anything he saw or learned in Victoria's orbit. "Is there a problem?" Jennifer asked, watching him. "No, just being thorough." Daniel signed where indicated, initialing each page. When he finished, Jennifer collected the documents with a satisfied nod. "Your new office is down the hall, third door on the left. Ms. Hale had it prepared yesterday. You'll have access to all executive systems by 9. She paused, and something almost like sympathy crossed her face. "Fair warning, Mr. Carter, working directly with Ms. Hale is intense. She has very high standards and very little patience for incompetence." "I appreciate the heads up. I'm not trying to discourage you. Just prepare you. The last person in your position lasted 3 months before requesting a transfer." Daniel blinked. "There was someone else in this position?" "Briefly. It didn't work out." Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then gestured toward Victoria's office. "She's ready for you. Good luck." Daniel knocked once and entered. Victoria sat behind her desk, looking every inch the powerful executive in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But when she looked up, he saw the careful control in her expression, the slight tightness around her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well either. "Mr. Carter, right on time." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I trust you've reviewed the paperwork?" "Yes, ma'am. All signed." "Good. Then let's discuss expectations." Victoria steepled her fingers, her gaze direct and assessing. "This position is about more than data analysis. You'll be my strategic sounding board, my second set of eyes on high-stakes decisions, my early warning system for problems others might miss. I need someone who can think critically, challenge my assumptions when necessary, and maintain absolute discretion." "I understand." "Do you?" She leaned forward slightly. "Because what I'm really asking is whether you can separate professional objectivity from personal judgment. What you saw yesterday morning, that can't influence how you work with me. I can't have you walking on eggshells treating me like I'm fragile. I'm not fragile. I'm managing a medical condition while running a company. There's a difference." Daniel chose his words carefully. "I have no interest in treating you differently because of what I saw, but I also won't pretend it didn't happen. You trusted me with the truth. I'll honor that trust by being honest with you, even when it's uncomfortable." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Approval, perhaps, or relief. "That's exactly what I need. Honest counsel, not empty flattery." She pulled a file from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. "This is the Castellano situation. I need your analysis by end of day." Daniel opened the file and immediately understood why his predecessor might have requested a transfer. Castellano Industries was one of Meridian's largest clients, and according to these documents, they were involved in some very questionable financial practices. Practices that could expose Meridian to significant legal liability if they continued the relationship. "You want my recommendation on whether to terminate the contract," he said slowly. I want your unbiased assessment of the risks versus the benefits. Castellano brings in 40 million annually. Losing them would hurt. But if their practices come to light and we're implicated, Victoria didn't finish the sentence. Daniel studied the documents, his analyst's brain already parsing the data, identifying patterns. How long have you known about this? 3 weeks. My general counsel has been advising me to cut ties immediately, but I wanted a second opinion from someone who understands the financial implications. And someone who has no political allegiance to protect, Daniel added. Victoria's smile was thin. That too. You have no history with Castellano, no relationships to preserve. You can be objective in a way my executive team can't. It was a test, Daniel realized. Victoria was watching to see if he'd tell her what she wanted to hear or what she needed to hear. The safe choice would be to recommend maintaining the relationship, protecting those $40 million. The right choice was probably going to cost him any illusion of job security he might have had. I'll have the analysis ready by 5, he said. Excellent. Jennifer will show you to your office. We'll meet again this afternoon to discuss your findings. Daniel stood to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. Mr. Carter, I meant what I said yesterday. If this arrangement doesn't work for you, if the pressure becomes too much, you can walk away. No retaliation, no consequences. I won't trap you here. He turned back to face her. I appreciate that, but I'm not planning to walk away. Everyone plans to stay, Victoria said quietly, until they realize what staying costs. The words haunted Daniel as he followed Jennifer down the hallway to his new office. It was modest compared to the executive suites, but still a vast improvement over his cubicle. A real desk, a window with a view of the city, actual walls instead of fabric partitions. His computer was already set up, waiting for his credentials. Jennifer handed him a security badge. This gives you access to all executive floors and the document archive in the basement. Your email has been upgraded to include all senior leadership distribution lists. And this, she produced a phone, sleek and expensive, is your company cell. Ms. Hale may contact you outside normal business hours. You're expected to respond promptly. Understood. One more thing. Jennifer's tone became more serious. The executive floor has its own politics. People will want to know why Ms. Hale brought you up here, what your relationship is, whether you're a threat to their positions. My advice? Keep your head down and your mouth shut. Don't get drawn into alliances or conflicts. Stay neutral. Is that what you do? I'm an assistant. No one sees me as a threat. You're different. You have Ms. Hale's ear now, which makes you dangerous. Jennifer checked her watch. I need to get back. If you need anything, extension 5200. She left, and Daniel sat down at his new desk, trying to absorb the surreal shift his life had taken. Through his window, he could see the morning sun illuminating the city, turning glass towers into pillars of light. Somewhere down there, in a daycare center across town, Lily was probably finger painting or playing blocks, happily unaware that her father had just stepped into a world where every decision carried consequences he couldn't fully predict. Daniel opened the Castellano file and got to work. The analysis took him most of the day. He cross-referenced financial records, reviewed transaction histories, traced the money through various shell companies and offshore accounts. The picture that emerged was damning. Castellano Industries wasn't just engaged in aggressive accounting. They were actively laundering money through what appeared to be legitimate investment vehicles. And Meridian, whether intentionally or through negligence, had been facilitating those transactions for at least 18 months. At 4:30, Daniel compiled his findings into a concise report. His recommendation was clear. Terminate the relationship immediately, conduct an internal audit of all Castellano-related transactions, and prepare for potential regulatory scrutiny. It would cost Meridian $40 million in annual revenue and possibly trigger an investigation that could damage their reputation. It was the right call. It was also professional suicide if Victoria had been hoping for a different answer. At 4:55, Jennifer called. Ms. Hale is ready for you. Daniel gathered his report and walked down the hallway, each step feeling like a march toward judgment. He knocked and entered to find Victoria standing at her window, looking out at the city. She didn't turn when he came in. Tell me, she said simply. Daniel laid out his findings, walking through the evidence methodically, presenting the risks and the legal exposure. He concluded with his recommendation, keeping his voice steady and professional even as his heart hammered against his ribs. When he finished, silence filled the office. Victoria remained at the window, her back to him, and Daniel couldn't read her reaction. Had he miscalculated? Had she wanted him to find a way to justify keeping Castellano despite the risks? Finally, she turned to face him. That's exactly what my general counsel said, word for word almost. I'm sorry if that's not what you wanted to hear. It's not about what I want to hear, Mr. Carter. It's about what's right. Victoria returned to her desk, sat down heavily. $40 million. Do you have any idea what losing that kind of revenue does to our quarterly projections? The questions it will raise with investors? Yes, ma'am. I do. But I also know what happens if we stay connected to Castellano when their practices come to light. And they will come to light. That kind of operation always collapses eventually. Victoria studied him for a long moment. You're not afraid of me, are you? The question surprised him. Should I be? Most people are. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear, or they hedge their recommendations with so many qualifications that the advice becomes meaningless. She tapped his report with one finger. You didn't hedge. You didn't soften the blow. You just told me the truth. That's what you hired me to do. Yes. Yes, it is. Victoria opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of water, took a long drink. Daniel noticed her hand was steady. No tremor, no sign of the panic he'd witnessed yesterday. I'm going to take your recommendation. We'll terminate the Castellano contract tomorrow and begin the internal audit. It's going to be painful, but you're right. Better to control the narrative than have it control us. Relief flooded through Daniel. I think that's the right call. I know it's the right call. That doesn't make it easy. Victoria leaned back in her chair, and for the first time since he'd entered, she looked tired. Really tired. Do you want to know why my last strategic analyst left? Jennifer mentioned he only lasted 3 months. She, Andrea Chen, brilliant woman, Harvard MBA, impeccable credentials. I brought her up here because I thought she'd challenge me, push back when I needed it. Instead, she spent 3 months trying to anticipate what I wanted and deliver exactly that. No original thought, no critical analysis. Just careful political maneuvering designed to make herself indispensable while taking zero actual risks. Why did you hire her in the first place? Because on paper, she was perfect. But what I learned is that credentials don't equal courage. You can have all the education in the world and still be too afraid to tell the truth when it matters. Victoria's gaze sharpened. You told me the truth today, even knowing it might cost you this position. Why? Daniel thought about how to answer that. Because my daughter is watching me, he said finally. Maybe not literally, not right now. But she's learning from my example what it means to be a person of integrity. And I can't teach her to be honest and brave if I'm spending my days telling powerful people what they want to hear instead of what they need to know. Something in Victoria's expression softened just for a moment. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She keeps me honest. Victoria nodded slowly, then straightened, all business again. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., we're meeting with the executive team to discuss Castellano. I want you there. You'll present your findings and face questions from people who are going to be very unhappy about losing that revenue. Some of them will try to discredit your analysis or find ways to maintain the relationship despite the risks. I need you to hold your ground. Daniel's stomach tightened. You want me to defend this recommendation to your entire leadership team? I want you to stand by your work. If your analysis is sound, and I believe it is, then it should withstand scrutiny. This is how you build credibility here, Mr. Carter. Not by hiding behind me, but by demonstrating that your counsel is worth following. It was a trial by fire. Daniel knew it, and Victoria knew he knew it. But she was also giving him an opportunity to establish himself as more than just her pet analyst, someone to be taken seriously in his own right. I'll be ready, he said. Good. Now go home to your daughter. Spend the evening with her. Tomorrow is going to be challenging. Daniel stood, then hesitated. Ms. Hale, thank you for trusting me with this. Don't thank me yet. Wait until after tomorrow's meeting. But there was the faintest hint of a smile on her face. And Mr. Carter, call me Victoria when we're alone. All this Ms. Hale formality is exhausting. It felt like a significant shift, an invitation into something closer than a purely professional relationship. Daniel nodded. Victoria, then. I'll see you tomorrow. He left before the moment could become awkward, before he could analyze too closely what that invitation meant, or what boundaries were quietly being redefined. The subway ride home gave him time to think, to process the whiplash of the last 48 hours. He'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from struggling to keep his head above water to swimming in currents he didn't fully understand. And at the center of it all was Victoria Hale, brilliant, demanding, vulnerable in ways she showed almost no one. What was he to her, really? A strategic analyst, yes. A confidant who'd seen her weakness, certainly. But there was something else emerging, something neither of them had named yet. A recognition of shared experience, perhaps. Two people who understood what it cost to keep functioning when everything inside was breaking. Lily ambushed him at the daycare entrance, launching herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him backward. Daddy, guess what I made today? I can't possibly guess. You'll have to show me. She produced a painting from her backpack. Bright swirls of color that might have been a sunset or might have been abstract expression. It was hard to tell. It's our family, she explained, pointing to 3 figures. That's you, and that's me, and that's Mom watching from the sky. Daniel's throat closed. It's beautiful, sweetheart. I told my teacher that Mom is always watching us, making sure we're okay. That's true, right? He knelt down to her level, looking into her earnest face. I think Mom would be very proud of both of us. We're doing okay, aren't we? We're doing great, Lily said with the confident certainty of a 6-year-old. And now we can go to the aquarium. Now we can go to the aquarium, Daniel confirmed. They walked home hand in hand, and Daniel let Lily's chatter wash over him. Stories about her friends, complaints about nap time being for babies, excited plans for the upcoming weekend. This was his anchor, he thought, this uncomplicated love, this simple joy. Whatever storms he was walking into at Meridian Capital, whatever complicated dynamics he was navigating with Victoria, Lily remained his North Star. That evening, after dinner and bath time and 3 stories before bed, Daniel sat in their small living room and reviewed his notes for tomorrow's meeting. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Victoria. I should have said this earlier, but thank you for today, for telling me the truth. It's rarer than you might think. VH Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back. It's what you deserve, what everyone deserves, actually. Truth, even when it's uncomfortable. See you tomorrow. DC. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, get some sleep, Daniel. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. He smiled despite himself at the use of his first name, at the implied concern. Then he set the phone aside and tried to follow her advice, though sleep came slowly, his mind already anticipating the battle ahead. The executive conference room on the 52nd floor seated 20 people comfortably. At 8 a.m., it held 12. Victoria's senior leadership team, each of them successful, ambitious, and accustomed to getting their way. Daniel recognized a few faces from company presentations. Marcus Webb, his former supervisor, looking nervous about being called up to the executive floor. Robert Chen, CFO, whose reputation for creative accounting made Daniel instantly wary. Patricia Morrison, general counsel, who'd been advising Victoria to cut ties with Castellano from the start. Victoria sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a navy suit, her expression giving nothing away. She'd placed Daniel to her right, a visible signal of his position, his importance to this discussion. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Victoria began. We're here to discuss the Castellano Industries account and some concerning information that's come to light. Mr. Carter, would you present your findings? And just like that, Daniel was on stage. He stood, clicked to the first slide of his presentation, and began walking through the analysis. He kept his voice steady, his data points clear and irrefutable. But he could feel the tension building in the room with every revelation, every piece of evidence that Castellano was using Meridian to facilitate what amounted to money laundering. When he finished, silence. Then Robert Chen leaned forward, his expression skeptical. With all due respect, these are serious allegations. Do we have independent verification of these findings? The data comes directly from our own transaction records, Daniel said, cross-referenced with public corporate filings and banking disclosures. I can provide additional documentation if needed. I'm not questioning the data. I'm questioning the interpretation. Aggressive accounting isn't the same as illegal activity. It crosses the line when shell companies exist solely to obscure the origin of funds, Daniel countered. These aren't legitimate business entities. They're financial instruments designed to hide transactions from regulatory oversight. Chen's jaw tightened. You've been in this position for what? 1 day. And you're telling me we should abandon a $40 million client based on your interpretation of complex financial structures you may not fully understand? The dismissal was clear. Daniel felt his face flush but kept his voice level. I've been analyzing financial data for 6 years. I understand these structures perfectly well. And yes, I'm recommending we terminate the relationship before their practices implicate us in their legal troubles. Which haven't materialized yet, another voice interjected. Tom Bradford, head of client relations. We're talking about destroying a lucrative partnership based on hypothetical risk. Risk that Patricia has been warning us about for weeks, Victoria said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Patricia, would you like to add your perspective? The general counsel nodded. Mr. Carter's analysis confirms what my team has been saying. Castellano's practices expose us to significant regulatory liability. If federal investigators start looking into their operations, and based on these patterns, I believe they will, we need to have clean hands. Otherwise, we're looking at potential charges of facilitation, possibly conspiracy. That's an extreme characterization, Chen protested. It's a legal reality, Patricia shot back, and one I've been trying to make this team understand for 3 weeks. The room erupted into argument, voices overlapping, accusations flying, the careful veneer of professional courtesy cracking under the pressure of $40 million and competing priorities. Daniel sat quietly, watching the dynamics, understanding that this wasn't really about his analysis. This was about power, about who influenced Victoria's decisions, about territorial battles that had been building long before he arrived. Victoria let them argue for exactly 2 minutes. Then she stood, and the room fell silent. Enough! Her voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. I've heard everyone's concerns, and I've made my decision. We're terminating the Castellano contract effective immediately. Robert, you'll handle the financial transition. Tom, you'll manage client communication. Patricia, your team will conduct a comprehensive audit of all Castellano-related transactions to ensure we're insulated from their legal exposure. Chen's face darkened. Victoria, I strongly advise against this. The financial hit alone is acceptable compared to the alternative, Victoria interrupted. I'm not risking this company's reputation or legal standing to protect one client, regardless of their revenue contribution. The decision is final. Based on the recommendation of an analyst who's been here for 1 day, Chen said, his anger barely controlled. An analyst whose only qualification seems to be that he's willing to tell you what Patricia's been saying all along. The implication was clear. That Daniel was Victoria's puppet, a convenient voice to support decisions she'd already made. It was a clever attack designed to undermine both of them simultaneously. Daniel started to respond, but Victoria's hand came down gently on his shoulder, a silent signal. She would handle this. Mr. Carter's qualifications, Victoria said coldly, include 6 years of exemplary data analysis, 3 commendations for exceptional work, and a track record of identifying problems others miss. His recommendation happens to align with Patricia's legal counsel because they're both correct. If that threatens you, Robert, perhaps we need to discuss why you're so invested in maintaining a relationship that puts us at legal risk. The challenge hung in the air. Chen's face flushed, but he had sense enough not to push further. Of course not. I'm simply concerned about the financial implications. Your concern is noted. The decision stands. Victoria's gaze swept the room. We have 48 hours to execute this transition smoothly. I expect everyone's full cooperation. Are we clear? Nods around the table, some more reluctant than others. Good. We'll reconvene Friday to review progress. Dismissed. The executives filed out, most of them avoiding eye contact with Daniel. Patricia paused beside him, offering a small smile. Welcome to the firing line, she murmured. You did well. Marcus stopped on his way out, looking shell-shocked. Jesus, Carter, What the hell have you gotten yourself into? I'm still figuring that out, Daniel admitted. When the room cleared, only Victoria remained, gathering her materials with deliberate calm. But Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. That was brutal, he said quietly. That was nothing. Wait until Robert starts working the board members, trying to undermine the decision. Victoria closed her portfolio with a sharp snap. He has allies there, people who care more about quarterly earnings than legal exposure. But can he actually reverse your decision? He can make my life difficult, apply pressure, force me to spend political capital defending a choice that should be obvious. She met his eyes. And he'll target you too. Make sure you understand that. You're associated with me now, which makes you a liability in some people's eyes. I can handle it. Can you? Victoria's expression was hard to read. Because Robert Chen is very good at destroying people who get in his way. He'll dig into your background, look for vulnerabilities, find ways to make you look incompetent or corrupt, or both. He plays a long game, and he plays it well. Daniel thought about Lily, about the life they'd built from the wreckage of Sarah's death. I don't have any skeletons. My life is pretty straightforward. Everyone has pressure points. For you, it's your daughter. He'll look for ways to make your work-life balance impossible, force you into situations where you have to choose between being here and being there for her. The accuracy of that assessment chilled him. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you blindsided, and because Victoria hesitated, and Daniel saw something vulnerable flicker across her face before she locked it down. Because I need you to know what you're signing up for. It's not too late to walk away. I meant what I said, no retaliation. But Daniel was beginning to understand that Victoria's offers of escape were actually tests. She was checking whether he'd run when things got difficult, whether his commitment was real or convenient. I'm not walking away, he said firmly. We're doing the right thing with Castellano. If Chen wants to fight about it, let him fight. I'll stand by the analysis. Something shifted in Victoria's posture, relief maybe, or respect. Then we stand together. But Daniel? She used his first name deliberately. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is just about business. Everything in this world is personal. Every decision, every alliance, every conflict. Robert doesn't care about Castellano's revenue. He cares that I made a choice that diminishes his influence. And now he'll care that you were part of that choice. What should I do? Your job. Do it well. Don't give him ammunition. Victoria gathered her things, headed for the door. Then she paused, looking back. And watch your back. Robert's very good at finding angles. If there's anything in your past that could be weaponized, he'll find it. She left, and Daniel sat alone in the conference room, watching the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably having snack time, oblivious to the corporate warfare her father had just stepped into. He'd wanted to provide a better life for her. Now he needed to make sure that ambition didn't backfire catastrophically. His phone buzzed, a text from an unfamiliar number. You made some enemies today. Might want to be more careful who you align yourself with. A friend. Daniel stared at the message, cold dread settling in his stomach. It had begun already. The games, the manipulation, the invisible battles that happened in the margins of corporate life. He deleted the message and stood up. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one. But he'd do it his way, with truth, with integrity, with the kind of courage Sarah had always believed he possessed. Even if right now, he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself. The anonymous text message haunted Daniel for the rest of the week. He kept checking his phone, half expecting another warning, another veiled threat. But nothing came. The silence was somehow worse than the initial contact, suggesting that whoever had sent it was watching, waiting, gathering information before making their next move. By Friday afternoon, the Castellano termination was proceeding smoothly on the surface. Too smoothly, Victoria observed during their daily check-in. She sat across from Daniel in his office, her expression thoughtful as she reviewed the transition reports. Robert's being cooperative, she said, and it sounded like an accusation. Helpful, even. He personally called Castellano's CEO to smooth the separation, offered generous terms for contract dissolution. Isn't that what we wanted? What we wanted was Robert to do his job without sabotaging the process. This level of accommodation makes me suspicious. Victoria set down the report. He's planning something, I just can't see what yet. Daniel's computer chimed with an email notification. He glanced at the screen and his stomach dropped. The sender was internal audit. Subject line, routine review required. Victoria noticed his reaction. What is it? Internal audit wants to review my access logs and transaction history. They're calling it routine, but the timing seems convenient? Victoria's jaw tightened. Let me see that. Daniel turned his monitor toward her. She scanned the email quickly, her expression darkening with each line. This isn't routine. Someone requested a specific investigation into your activities. They're looking for evidence that you've accessed confidential information inappropriately or used your position for personal gain. But I haven't done anything wrong. That won't matter if they find something that looks questionable out of context. And Robert's very good at creating context. Victoria stood, began pacing. When did you first access the Castellano files? Tuesday morning. You gave me the assignment Monday afternoon. I started work first thing Tuesday. And your system access was upgraded Monday evening, correct? Daniel nodded, beginning to see the problem. So if someone wanted to argue that I accessed confidential client information before I was officially authorized, they could build a case for misconduct. Never mind that I personally assigned you the task and expedited your clearance. They'll focus on the technical timeline, make it look like you overstepped your authority. Victoria stopped pacing, faced him directly. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. Robert's using the audit process to undermine your credibility and by extension question my judgment in hiring you. The office phone rang. Jennifer's voice came through the speaker. Ms. Hale, the board chairman is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Victoria and Daniel exchanged glances. I'll take it in my office, Victoria said. Then to Daniel, don't respond to the audit request yet. Let me handle this. She left quickly, and Daniel sat alone with the sinking realization that he'd become a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. Lily's asking if you can make it to her class presentation at 3 p.m. She's very excited. Daniel checked his watch. 2:47. The presentation started in 13 minutes, and he was at least 25 minutes away, even in light traffic. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, firing off a quick text to Victoria. Family emergency, we'll explain later. The subway felt impossibly slow. Daniel checked his phone obsessively, watching the minutes tick past. 2:53, 2:58. He emerged from the station at 3:04 and ran the remaining 3 blocks to the daycare center, arriving breathless and sweating to find Lily standing at the front of a small classroom, her face crumpling with disappointment. You missed it, she said when he burst through the door. I already did my presentation about families. Daniel's heart shattered. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I got here as fast as I could. You promised you'd be here. You promised. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Everyone else's parents were here. Even Emma's dad came, and he works really far away. But you weren't here. Mrs. Chen appeared at his elbow, her expression sympathetic but concerned. Perhaps Lily could do her presentation again, just for her father. I don't want to do it again, Lily said, her voice small and broken. It's not the same. Daniel knelt down, reaching for her, but she stepped back. The rejection cut deeper than any corporate maneuvering ever could. Lily, please. I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Work was crazy, and I lost track of time. Work is always crazy. Work is more important than me. That's not true. You're the most important thing in my whole world. Then why weren't you here? She looked at him with Sarah's eyes, and the accusation there was devastating. Mom would have been here. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Mrs. Chen gently took Lily's hand. Why don't we go have some juice while your daddy catches his breath? Then maybe you two can talk. She led Lily away, leaving Daniel kneeling on the classroom floor surrounded by construction paper families and children's artwork, feeling like the worst father in the world. He'd gotten so caught up in corporate warfare, in proving himself to Victoria and defending against Robert Chen's machinations, that he'd forgotten what actually mattered. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Board chairman received an anonymous complaint about improper hiring practices. Specifically, that I created your position as a reward for keeping quiet about confidential information. We need to talk. How's the family emergency? Daniel stared at the message, rage and despair warring in his chest. This was escalating faster than he'd anticipated. Robert wasn't just questioning his credentials. He was manufacturing a scandal that could destroy both their careers. And meanwhile, he'd just broken his daughter's heart by missing the one thing she'd asked him to show up for. He typed back, "Missed my daughter's school presentation. She's devastated. Need to handle this first, then we'll talk." Victoria's response came immediately. "Family first, always. We'll deal with the board on Monday." The simple validation steadied him slightly. Daniel stood, brushed off his pants, and went to find Lily. She sat in the reading corner with Mrs. Chen clutching her stuffed rabbit and refusing to look at him. "Lilybug," Daniel said softly, sitting down beside her. "Can I tell you something?" She didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. "You're right. I promised I'd be here, and I broke that promise, and that's not okay. It doesn't matter how important work is or how crazy things got. I should have been here for you." He waited, giving her space to process. "I can't promise that work will never be complicated, but I can promise that I'll try harder to put you first. Because you're right about something else too. Your mom would have been here. She always showed up for the things that mattered, and I need to do better at being the kind of parent she was." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I miss her, Daddy." "I miss her too, sweetheart. Every single day. And now I feel like I'm losing you too. You're always tired and stressed and thinking about work. It's like you're here, but you're not really here." The observation was painfully accurate. Daniel pulled her into his lap, relieved when she didn't resist. "I'm going to do better, I promise. And this time I mean it." "How do I know you mean it?" Daniel thought carefully about how to answer that. "Because I'm going to prove it, starting right now. What do you want to do this afternoon? Anything you want." Lily pulled back to look at him, suspicious. "Anything? Anything?" "It's Friday. I'm taking the rest of the day off, and we're going to have an adventure. Just you and me. Can we go to the park? The one with the big swings?" "Absolutely. And can we get ice cream after, the kind with gummy bears? We can get whatever flavor you want." For the first time since he'd arrived, Lily smiled. It was tentative and fragile, but it was there. "Okay, but Daddy, you have to turn off your phone, no work stuff." It was a fair demand. Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her the screen, and powered it down completely. "No work stuff, just us." They spent the afternoon at the park, pushing the boundaries of how high the swings could go, racing down the slide, building elaborate castles in the sandbox. Daniel threw himself into it completely, pushing aside thoughts of the audit, the board investigation, the anonymous threats. For 3 hours, he existed only in Lily's world, where the worst crisis was running out of sand for the moat, and the greatest triumph was successfully completing the monkey bars without falling. At the ice cream shop, Lily ordered a catastrophic combination of flavors while Daniel got plain vanilla. They sat at a small table by the window, and Lily chattered about her friends and her favorite books and the upcoming field trip to the zoo. Daniel listened with complete attention, memorizing the details, the expressions, the sound of her laugh when she described something particularly funny. "This is nice," Lily said, scraping the bottom of her bowl. "I like when it's just us." "Me too, sweetheart." "Are you going to keep your new job?" The question surprised him. "Do you want me to?" Lily considered this seriously. "I like that we have more money, but I don't like that you're sad all the time now. You think I don't notice, but I do. You get this look on your face like you're worried about something big." Daniel marveled at her perceptiveness. "The new job is complicated. Some people at work aren't very nice, and they're making things difficult, but I'm trying to handle it. Is your boss nice?" He thought about Victoria, her demands, her vulnerability, the unexpected alliance they'd formed. "Yeah, she's nice. She's going through some hard things too, actually. Kind of like how we went through hard things when Mom was sick." "Does she have a family?" "No, I think she's pretty lonely, to be honest." Lily frowned. "That's sad. Everyone should have family, even if it's small." She looked up at him with sudden inspiration. "Maybe she could have dinner with us sometime. Then she wouldn't be so lonely." The suggestion was so innocent, so pure-hearted, that Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Maybe. We'll see." "You always say we'll see when you mean no. This time I mean maybe. Your teacher's always saying we should be kind to people who are going through hard things, right? Maybe having dinner with us would be a kind thing to do." Lily brightened. "Okay, but we have to make something good. Not just mac and cheese, maybe the chicken Mom used to make. We could try that. I'd need to find the recipe. It's in the red notebook, the one Mom wrote all her recipes in. Lily said this matter-of-factly, as if she consulted Sarah's recipe collection regularly. Maybe she did. Maybe that was her way of staying connected to her mother. They walked home as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily held his hand and skipped beside him, her earlier devastation apparently forgotten. Children were resilient that way, Daniel thought. They forgave quickly, loved unconditionally, moved forward without holding grudges. Adults could learn something from that. When they reached their building, Daniel finally allowed himself to think about the work crisis waiting for him. He'd turned off his phone for 3 hours. 3 hours during which Victoria might have needed him, the audit might have progressed, Robert Chen might have made additional moves against them. But looking down at Lily's happy face, he couldn't bring himself to regret the choice. After Lily was asleep, Daniel turned his phone back on. 17 missed calls, 34 emails. His heart sank as he scanned the senders. Jennifer, Patricia Morrison, 3 different board members, and 8 messages from Victoria. He called her back immediately. She answered on the first ring. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I turned off my phone. I promised Lily no work interruptions." A pause. Then Victoria's voice came back softer. "How is she?" "Better. We had a good afternoon. But I'm guessing things here aren't good." "That's putting it mildly. The board called an emergency session. Someone leaked details of the Castellano termination to the financial press, along with allegations that the decision was based on faulty analysis from an unqualified analyst who may have accessed confidential information inappropriately." Daniel closed his eyes. "Robert." "Almost certainly, though he's been very careful not to leave fingerprints. The leak appears to have come from an external source, someone with knowledge of our internal deliberations." Victoria's frustration was palpable. The board wants answers. They want to know why we terminated a lucrative contract based on the recommendation of someone who's been in this position for less than a week, and they want to understand the nature of our relationship. What does that mean? It means Robert's been whispering that there's something inappropriate between us, that I created this position for you as a personal favor rather than a legitimate business need, that your analysis was compromised by loyalty to me rather than objective assessment of the facts. Anger surged through Daniel. That's complete garbage. The Castellano analysis stands on its own merits. Patricia's legal team reached the same conclusion independently. I know that, you know that. But Robert's planted doubt, and now the board wants a full investigation. They're bringing in an external firm to review the Castellano decision, audit both our activities, and determine whether proper procedures were followed. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. And until it's resolved, both our credibility is in question. Victoria sighed, and Daniel could hear the exhaustion in it. I'm sorry, Daniel, I pulled you into this mess. If I'd known Robert would react this aggressively, you would have what? Made a different decision? Let Castellano drag us into their legal problems just to avoid conflict? No, but I might have protected you better, anticipated the attacks and prepared defenses. Daniel thought about Lily's question earlier. Are you going to keep your new job? He thought about Sarah's voice in his memory. Be brave. Stand up for what's right. He thought about the man he wanted to be versus the man he'd been settling for. We fight back, he said firmly. The analysis is solid. The decision was correct. If Robert wants to make this about our credibility, we demonstrate that our credibility is unimpeachable. The investigation will be invasive. They'll examine every email, every meeting, every decision you've made since coming up to the executive floor. They'll look for anything that could be construed as inappropriate, personal relationships, conflicts of interest, questionable judgment. Then they won't find anything, because there's nothing to find. Daniel paused. Unless there's something you're not telling me, some vulnerability Robert could exploit that I don't know about. The silence stretched long enough that Daniel's chest tightened. Victoria? There's nothing that relates to you or your work, she said finally. But there are things in my past that Robert could weaponize if he chose to. Things I've worked very hard to keep private. Like the panic attacks? Among other things. She took a breath. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. If this investigation uncovers information about me, Information that makes you uncomfortable or compromises your position. Will you walk away? It was the same offer she'd made before, but this time it sounded different. This time it sounded like she was expecting him to leave, preparing for abandonment. No, Daniel said simply. I won't walk away. We're in this together now. You can't know that until you know what the information is. Then tell me. Tell me what Robert might find, what he might use. Let me make an informed decision about whether I'm staying or going. Another long silence. Daniel waited, giving her space to decide how much trust to extend, how vulnerable to allow herself to be. Not over the phone, Victoria said finally. Tomorrow. Can you meet me somewhere outside the office? Somewhere we can talk privately? What time? Morning, early, before either of us has to think about the investigation or the board or any of it. She gave him an address in a neighborhood Daniel didn't immediately recognize. It's a coffee shop, quiet, out of the way. No one from Meridian ever goes there. I'll be there. What time? 7? And Daniel? Come alone. Don't tell anyone about this meeting, not even people you trust. The cloak and dagger nature of it should have worried him. Instead, it reinforced what he already knew. Victoria was genuinely afraid of what might come out, what Robert might uncover, and she needed to know if Daniel would stand with her when the truth emerged. I'll see you at 7, he promised. After they hung up, Daniel sat in the darkness of his living room, processing everything. The investigation, the leaked information, the allegations of impropriety. Robert Chen was methodically dismantling both their reputations, and they had limited options for fighting back. But there was something else bothering him, something that had been nagging at his consciousness since the first anonymous text message. Someone inside Meridian was feeding Robert information, specific, detailed information about Daniel's access logs, his interactions with Victoria, possibly even the content of their private conversations, which meant someone close to them was either a willing conspirator or being manipulated into providing intelligence. Daniel pulled out his laptop and began reviewing the timeline of events. The Castellano assignment on Monday, the executive meeting on Wednesday, the audit notification on Friday, the board emergency session today. Each escalation had been precisely timed, each attack carefully coordinated. This wasn't opportunistic revenge. This was a planned campaign. His phone buzzed. Jennifer. I apologize for the late message, but you should know, Robert Chen requested copies of all your email correspondence since joining the executive team. IT is required to comply with his request as acting CFO. I thought you'd want to be aware. Daniel stared at the message. Every email, including his private communications with Victoria, including the text where she'd thanked him for telling the truth, the message where she'd used his first name, the casual exchanges that could be twisted to suggest something inappropriate. He typed back, "Thank you for the heads up. I appreciate it. Jennifer." For what it's worth, I think what Robert's doing is despicable. Ms. Hale is the best leader this company has had in 20 years, and you've done nothing wrong. But you should prepare yourself. He's very good at making innocent things look suspicious. It was more candor than Daniel expected from Victoria's assistant, more loyalty than professional obligation required. He saved the message, then went through his sent emails systematically, reviewing every communication with fresh eyes. What would an investigator see? What could be twisted or misinterpreted? Most of it was straightforward business communication. But there were a few exchanges that, isolated from context, might raise eyebrows. Victoria asking him to meet outside the office. Daniel commenting on her strength during a difficult board presentation. A message where she'd told him to go home early because he looked exhausted, followed by his response thanking her for the concern. Nothing inappropriate, but Robert wouldn't need inappropriate. He'd just need ambiguous, suggestive, enough to plant doubt. Daniel closed his laptop and checked on Lily one more time. She slept peacefully, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, her dark curls spread across the pillow exactly like Sarah's used to be. This was why he was fighting. Not for corporate prestige or career advancement, for the life his daughter deserved, for the example he wanted to set, for the promise he'd made to Sarah that he'd be brave when it mattered. He just hoped bravery would be enough. The coffee shop Victoria had chosen sat in a neighborhood Daniel had never visited, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a yoga studio. He arrived at 6:50 to find Victoria already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, the first time he'd seen her in anything other than business attire. It made her look younger, more vulnerable, more human. "You're early," she said when he approached. "So are you." "I don't sleep well these days. Too much to worry about." She gestured to the second cup. "Black, right? I remembered from the office." "Thanks." Daniel sat down, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. The shop was nearly empty, just an elderly man reading the newspaper and a young woman working on a laptop. No one who would recognize them or care about their conversation. Victoria studied him for a moment, then said, "You look tired." "Complicated week." "That's my fault. I keep apologizing for dragging you into this mess, and I need to stop. But I'm sorry. You deserved better than walking into a war zone." "I knew there would be politics. I just didn't expect it to get this vicious this quickly." "Robert's playing for keeps. He sees an opportunity to undermine me, and he's taking it." Victoria wrapped her hands around her own cup, staring down into the dark liquid. "I need to tell you some things. Things that might change how you feel about working with me. Things that Robert will almost certainly use if this investigation goes deep enough." Daniel waited, giving her space. "I told you I've been having panic attacks for 6 months. What I didn't tell you is why they started." She took a breath. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and clinical depression. I've been managing both with medication and therapy, and I've been largely successful. But the Donovan merger last year, the stress of that fight triggered a relapse. The panic attacks are a symptom of that relapse. "Okay," Daniel said quietly. "Thank you for trusting me with that. There's more. When I was 35, I had a breakdown, complete collapse. I spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric facility because I was a danger to myself. It's not in any public records. My family paid a lot of money to keep it private, but it's in my medical history, and if Robert subpoenas my health records as part of proving I'm unfit for leadership, he won't get that far." Daniel interrupted. "Medical records are protected. He'd need a court order, and no judge would grant one based on speculation. You'd be surprised what judges can be convinced to grant when wealthy men with political connections make requests." Victoria's smile was bitter. "But you're right. It's a long shot. More likely, he'll find someone who worked at the facility, someone willing to talk for the right price. Once that information is public, my career is over. The board won't keep a CEO with a history of psychiatric hospitalization. The shareholders will demand my resignation. Everything I've built will collapse." Daniel absorbed this information, understanding now the stakes Victoria was facing. She wasn't just fighting for her position. She was fighting to keep her most painful secrets private, to maintain the facade of strength that had protected her for years. "Is there anything else?" he asked. "Anything else Robert might find?" Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "I was married once, very briefly, right after college. It ended badly. He was abusive, both emotionally and physically. I got out, got divorced, tried to move on. But he's still out there, still angry that I left. If Robert finds him, convinces him to go public with his version of our relationship." She trailed off. "He'd paint you as unstable, difficult, someone with a pattern of failed relationships and emotional problems." "Exactly. It's all lies, but lies wrapped around enough truth to be believable." Victoria finally looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes. "So now you know. I'm not the invincible CEO everyone thinks I am. I'm someone who's been barely holding herself together, managing mental illness, running from an abusive past, and desperately trying to maintain the illusion of strength, because the moment I show weakness, everything falls apart." The honesty was devastating. Daniel wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, offer some gesture of comfort. But he sensed that wasn't what she needed right now. She needed him to respond not with pity, but with solidarity. "Sarah had depression," he said quietly, "after Lily was born. Postpartum, they called it, but it lasted for almost 2 years. She was ashamed of it, felt like she was failing as a mother because she couldn't just feel happy like she thought she should. I watched her fight that battle every day. The medication adjustments, the therapy sessions, the guilt when she couldn't get out of bed some mornings." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "So when you tell me you have anxiety and depression," Daniel continued, "all I hear is that you're managing a medical condition while excelling at an incredibly demanding job. That's not weakness. That's remarkable strength. And when you tell me about your past, the breakdown, the abusive marriage, all I see is someone who survived things that would have destroyed other people. You're still here, still fighting. That counts for something. But will the board see it that way? Will the shareholders? Probably not. They'll see liability and risk and reasons to force you out. Daniel paused. But that doesn't mean we let them win without a fight. How do we fight this? Robert has resources, connections, time. He can afford to wage a long campaign while we're trying to keep the company running. We beat him at his own game. He's trying to paint us as inappropriate, unethical, unfit for our positions. So we demonstrate the opposite. We're transparent, professional, beyond reproach. We welcome the investigation because we have nothing to hide. And we make sure the Castellano analysis stands up to the most rigorous scrutiny possible. Victoria considered this. You're suggesting we go on offense. I'm suggesting we don't cower. Robert expects us to get defensive, to start hiding things, to look guilty. Instead, we act like people who made the right decision for the right reasons and have nothing to apologize for. That's a risky strategy. If the investigation finds anything questionable, then we deal with it, but we don't preemptively surrender. Daniel leaned forward. Victoria, you hired me to tell you the truth. Here's the truth. You're one of the most brilliant leaders I've ever worked with. You make tough calls, you prioritize ethics over profit, and you genuinely care about doing the right thing. Yes, you have mental health challenges. So do millions of other people who manage successful careers and full lives. That doesn't disqualify you from leadership. It makes you human. The board won't see it that way. Maybe not all of them, but some will. Patricia Morrison will support you. She's already proven that. There must be others who respect your track record enough to look past Robert's attacks. Daniel paused. And if there aren't, if the board really is willing to destroy you based on manufactured scandal and ableist discrimination, then maybe Meridian doesn't deserve you as CEO. Victoria laughed, sharp and sudden. You're suggesting I walk away? I'm suggesting you stop assuming that keeping this job is worth any cost. What's the point of fighting to maintain a position that requires you to hide who you are, that punishes you for being human, that treats mental illness like a character flaw? It's all I have, Victoria said softly. This company, this role. It's my entire identity. No, it's not. It's what you do. It's not who you are. Daniel thought about Lily's observation the previous afternoon, about how he'd been disappearing into work stress. I'm learning that lesson myself, the hard way. My daughter told me yesterday that I'm always there, but not really there. That work has consumed me to the point where I've forgotten how to be present in my own life. What did you do? I turned off my phone and spent the afternoon with her. We went to the park, got ice cream, just existed together without any agenda or pressure. And it reminded me what actually matters, which is not corporate politics or career advancement. It's the people we love and the lives we're building outside these office walls. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I don't have people. I don't have a life outside Meridian. I've spent 20 years building this career at the expense of everything else. And now I'm 41 and completely alone, except for a mother who doesn't recognize me and an assistant who feels obligated to care because it's her job. That's not true. Jennifer cares about you because you're worth caring about. And for what it's worth, I care too. Not because you're my boss, but because I see you, the real you, the one who's scared and strong and trying her best to navigate impossible situations. That person deserves support and friendship and people who show up when things get hard. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you being so kind to me? Because someone needs to be. And because you'd do the same for me if our situations were reversed. You don't know that. Yes, I do. When Lily was devastated yesterday, when I texted you about the family emergency, you immediately told me to handle it first. You could have demanded I stay and deal with the board crisis. But you didn't. You prioritized my daughter over corporate problems. That tells me exactly what kind of person you are. Victoria brushed at her eyes quickly, composing herself. I'm not used to this. People seeing me as anything other than the CEO. It's disorienting. Get used to it, because I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to keep seeing you as a human being who deserves respect and support. Daniel finished his coffee. Now, let's talk strategy. How do we handle the investigation? They spent the next hour planning their approach. Full cooperation with the external auditors. Complete transparency about the Castellano decision-making process. Proactive communication with board members to counter Robert's narrative. And most importantly, documentation of everything, every analysis, every conversation, every decision point, to create an irrefutable record of their professionalism and integrity. By the time they left the coffee shop, Daniel felt cautiously optimistic. They had a plan, they had evidence, they had each other. It wasn't much against Robert Chen's resources and influence, but it was something. As they stood on the sidewalk preparing to part ways, Victoria said, "Your daughter asked if I could come to dinner sometime. You mentioned it yesterday." Daniel blinked, surprised she'd remembered. "You don't have to. I know you're busy. I'd like to, if the invitation's genuine." "It is." Lily's exact words were that everyone should have family, even if it's small. She thought having dinner with us might be a kind thing to do for someone who's lonely. Victoria's expression did something complicated. "She sounds like an extraordinary kid." "She is. Gets that from her mother." Daniel pulled out his phone. "How about next Friday? Fair warning, Lily will probably interrogate you about everything from your favorite color to whether you prefer cats or dogs." "I can handle interrogation. I do it for a living." "Not like this, you don't. 6-year-olds don't pull punches." They exchanged smiles, and for a moment the weight of the investigation and Robert's attacks and all the corporate warfare fell away. They were just two people making plans for dinner, finding connection in the midst of chaos. Daniel's phone buzzed. Patricia Morrison. "Need to talk ASAP. New development in the investigation. Call me when you can." The moment of peace shattered. Victoria saw his expression change and pulled out her own phone. She had the same message. "So much for our Saturday morning," she said dryly. "Welcome to our lives now," Daniel replied. They headed in opposite directions, both returning to the battle neither of them had chosen, but both were determined to fight. And somewhere across the city, Robert Chen was undoubtedly planning his next move, confident that he'd already won. He had no idea how wrong he was about to be. Patricia Morrison's office on Sunday morning felt like a war room. Whiteboards covered with timelines, document stacks arranged with military precision, and 3 laptops running simultaneous analysis. The general counsel looked like she hadn't slept, her usual polished appearance replaced by a rumpled blazer and coffee-stained shirt. "Thank you both for coming on such short notice," Patricia said as Daniel and Victoria entered. "We have a significant problem and a potential solution. I'm not sure which terrifies me more." Victoria closed the door behind them. "What happened?" "The external auditors started their preliminary review yesterday. Routine stuff, access logs, email records, documented decision processes. Except they found something. Or rather, someone made sure they found something." Patricia pulled up a document on her laptop and turned the screen toward them. "This is an email dated 2 weeks before Daniel was hired. From you, Victoria, to Robert Chen. Subject line: Strategic Personnel Placement." Daniel leaned in to read. The email outlined Victoria's intention to create a new executive position for someone with specific qualifications that matched Daniel's profile almost exactly. But the language was ambiguous, suggesting the position was being created for a particular individual rather than as a legitimate business need. "I never sent that email," Victoria said immediately. "Patricia, I've never even discussed personnel placement with Robert outside of formal HR channels." "I know, the metadata is wrong. The timestamp doesn't align with your calendar. You were in a board meeting when this was allegedly sent, and the writing style doesn't match your typical communication patterns. Someone forged this and planted it in the system." Daniel felt cold dread spreading through his chest. "They're manufacturing evidence." "Sophisticated evidence," Patricia corrected. "Whoever did this has high-level access to our email servers and enough technical knowledge to create a convincing forgery. The auditors initially flagged it as genuine. I only caught the discrepancies because I know Victoria's communication style intimately." "Robert," Victoria said flatly. "It has to be Robert. He has the access, the motive, and the resources to pull this off." "Probably. But we can't prove it. And here's the worst news. This isn't the only forgery. There are 3 more emails, all strategically damaging, all perfectly timed to suggest an inappropriate relationship between you two. Lunch invitations that never happened, late-night conversations about personal matters. A message where Daniel supposedly thanks Victoria for taking care of him in ways that sound financially or romantically suggestive. Daniel's stomach turned. This is insane. Anyone who actually knows us would realize these are fabricated. Unfortunately, the people making decisions don't know you. They know what the documentation shows. And what it shows is a pattern of favoritism, possible romantic involvement, and quid pro quo arrangements. Patricia closed the laptop. The auditors are required to include this in their preliminary report to the board, which means by Tuesday, every board member will have seen evidence, fabricated evidence, that you two are engaged in an inappropriate relationship that compromises your professional judgment. Victoria sank into a chair, her face pale. Robert's not just trying to discredit us. He's trying to destroy us completely. He's trying to force your resignation, Patricia agreed. Present you with evidence so damaging that stepping down seems like the only option. Classic corporate assassination. Make the target believe they've already lost, so they surrender without a fight. So we fight, Daniel said. We expose the forgeries, prove the emails are fake, demonstrate that Robert's behind this. That's where it gets complicated. Patricia pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. To prove forgery, we need access to the server logs and metadata analysis. But requesting that access tips our hand. Robert will know we're on to him, and he'll cover his tracks. Plus, if we accuse him without ironclad proof, we look paranoid and desperate. What's the alternative? Let the board see these emails and do nothing? No, we get ahead of the narrative. Patricia looked between them. You two need to go public with the truth before Robert controls the story. Full transparency about your working relationship, the decisions you've made, why you hired Daniel, everything. Strip away the mystery so these forged emails lose their power. Victoria shook her head. If we go public about my mental health struggles, my past, everything I told Daniel yesterday. You don't have to disclose medical information, Patricia interrupted. That's protected and private. But you do need to explain the hiring decision, the professional relationship, and why the Castellano termination was the right call. Present yourselves as exactly what you are, colleagues working together to make sound business decisions. Make it boring. Make it obvious. Make it so unremarkable that these dramatic emails clearly don't fit the reality. Daniel could see the logic, but he also saw the risk. You're asking Victoria to expose herself to scrutiny and judgment, to defend decisions that shouldn't need defending. I'm asking both of you to control your own narrative instead of letting Robert write it for you. Patricia's expression was fierce. Look, I've been a lawyer for 23 years. I've seen careers destroyed by silence and saved by strategic transparency. Robert's counting on you to hide, to protect your privacy, to let shame or fear keep you quiet. Don't give him what he expects. Victoria was silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. What exactly are you proposing? Board presentation. Monday morning, before the auditors submit their preliminary report, you present the complete picture of Daniel's hiring, the strategic need for the position, his qualifications, the vetting process. Then Daniel presents an expanded version of the Castellano analysis, demonstrating the thoroughness and professionalism of his work. You make it clear this was a sound business decision executed by competent professionals. No romance, no favoritism, just good management. And when Robert produces these forged emails, Daniel asked, you express shock and concern that someone would fabricate such material. You offer full cooperation in investigating how fraudulent documents entered the company's system. You act like victims of corporate sabotage, which you are, while maintaining complete professionalism and confidence in your actual work. Patricia paused. It's not a perfect strategy, but it's better than waiting for Robert to strike first. Victoria stood, moved to the window, her usual thinking position. Daniel watched her process the options, calculate the risks, weigh the costs against the alternatives. This was what she did best, he realized. Make impossible decisions under pressure. Choose between bad options and worse ones. Somehow find a path forward when retreat seems safer. We do it, Victoria said finally. Monday morning, full transparency. We control the narrative. She turned back to face them. Patricia, I need you to prepare a legal brief on corporate email security and the penalties for forging business communications. Don't name Robert, but make it clear that fraudulent documentation is a serious crime with serious consequences. Consider it done. Daniel, you'll need to expand the Castellano analysis. I want every assumption documented, every data point sourced, every conclusion defensible under the most aggressive questioning. Can you have that ready by tomorrow afternoon? I'll have it ready by tonight. Victoria nodded, then seemed to hesitate. There's one more thing. Something that might help or might backfire spectacularly. I'm not sure which. Patricia and Daniel waited. The board needs to understand that I'm human, not infallible, not superhuman, just a person doing her best under difficult circumstances. What if I acknowledge that publicly? Not the specifics of my mental health history, but the general truth. That I manage challenges while leading this company, that I've built systems and support structures to ensure those challenges don't compromise my work. That's incredibly risky, Patricia said slowly. You'd be giving ammunition to anyone who wants to paint you as unstable or unfit. Or I'd be demonstrating the kind of strength and self-awareness that modern leadership requires. How many CEOs struggle silently with anxiety, depression, chronic illness, personal crises? How many hide those struggles because they're afraid of appearing weak? What if I refuse to hide? Victoria's voice gained conviction. Robert wants to use my vulnerability against me. What if I claimed it first? Turned it into an asset instead of a liability? Daniel felt something shift in his chest, admiration mixed with concern. That's incredibly brave. It's also a huge gamble. Well, everything about this situation is a gamble. At least this way I'm betting on honesty instead of deception. Victoria looked at Patricia. What's your legal opinion? As your lawyer, I advise against disclosing anything that could be weaponized. But as someone who respects the hell out of you, I think it could be powerful. If you frame it right, if you own your story instead of letting it own you, it could change the entire dynamic of this conversation. Then we do it. Tomorrow morning, I stop hiding. Victoria's smile was almost defiant. Robert thinks he knows my weaknesses. Let's show him he has no idea who he's actually fighting. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Patricia drafted the legal brief, Daniel expanded his analysis, and Victoria worked on her presentation, the most honest, vulnerable public statement she'd ever made. By evening, they had a strategy. Whether it would work was another question entirely. Daniel left Patricia's office at 7, exhausted but energized. He'd called Mrs. Chen earlier to arrange emergency childcare, and she'd taken Lily for the afternoon with her usual grace and understanding. Now he headed to pick up his daughter, his mind still spinning with everything they'd planned. Lily was playing board games with Mrs. Chen's grandchildren when he arrived. She looked up, saw him, and her face brightened. Daddy, I won 3 times. That's my girl. Daniel scooped her up, grateful for the simple joy in her voice, the uncomplicated happiness. Thank you so much, he said to Mrs. Chen. I know this was last minute. Family helps family, she said simply. Is everything okay? Getting there. Tomorrow's a big day at work, but I think we're ready. Mrs. Chen studied him with the perceptiveness of someone who'd raised 4 children and seen every variety of stress. You look different, lighter somehow. Daniel considered that. I think I'm done being afraid. Whatever happens tomorrow, at least I'll know I stood up for what's right. That's all any of us can do. She patted his arm. Your wife would be proud. The words stayed with him on the walk home, through dinner preparations, through Lily's bath time and bedtime routine. Sarah would be proud, not of his career advancement or his proximity to power, but of his willingness to fight for someone who needed defending, to risk security for integrity, to choose courage over convenience. Daddy? Lily's sleepy voice pulled him from his thoughts. He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Yeah, sweetheart? Is your boss still coming to dinner on Friday? I hope so. We might have to postpone depending on how this week goes, but I'll ask her. I think you should ask her tomorrow, after your big day. Then she'll have something nice to look forward to. The simple wisdom of it made Daniel smile. That's a really good idea. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know. Mom told me I got it from both of you. Lily yawned. Daddy, are you scared about tomorrow? A little bit, but also excited. We're going to tell the truth, and the truth is powerful. Like in stories. The heroes always tell the truth even when it's hard. Exactly like in stories. Lily's eyes drifted closed. Then you'll be okay. Because you're my hero, And heroes always win. If only it were that simple, Daniel thought. But he kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you, Lilybug," before turning out the light and heading back to his laptop for a few more hours of preparation. The board meeting Monday morning had the atmosphere of a trial. 12 board members sat around the conference table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Robert Chen occupied a seat near the head of the table, his face carefully neutral, but Daniel could see the anticipation in his eyes. He thought he'd already won. He thought Victoria and Daniel would walk in defensive, apologetic, ready to surrender. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Victoria began with calm authority, walking through the strategic rationale for creating Daniel's position. She presented his qualifications, his track record, the competitive vetting process that had identified him as the best candidate. She acknowledged the speed of the hiring decision while explaining why timing had been critical for the Castellano situation. "Some of you have received information suggesting impropriety in this hiring," Victoria said, her voice steady. "I want to address that directly. Daniel Carter was hired because he is exceptionally qualified, because the company needed his expertise immediately, and because I trust his judgment and integrity. Any suggestion of favoritism or inappropriate relationship is categorically false. And if someone has fabricated evidence to suggest otherwise, I encourage this board to investigate who would benefit from such deception and why." She let that hang in the air for a moment, watching Robert's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. Then Daniel presented the expanded Castellano analysis. He walked them through every data point, every assumption, every conclusion. He showed them the legal exposure, the regulatory risks, the potential costs of maintaining the relationship versus the manageable impact of termination. By the time he finished, even the most skeptical board members were nodding. "Our general counsel reached identical conclusions independently," Patricia added. "The Castellano decision was sound, ethical, and in the company's best interest. It also happened to cost us significant revenue, which suggests the analysis was objective rather than politically motivated." The board chairman, an older man named Harold Chen, no relation to Robert, thankfully, leaned forward. "Ms. Hale, I appreciate the thorough presentation, but I have to ask, these emails the auditors found, can you explain those?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "I'd like to see them, because I can tell you with absolute certainty that any email suggesting personal involvement with Mr. Carter is fraudulent. I have never sent such communications, and I welcome a full forensic investigation of our email system to determine who created these documents and why." "You're suggesting someone forged emails?" "I'm stating a fact. Those emails, if they exist as described, are fabrications. And I'd very much like to know who has the technical access and motivation to create such material." All eyes turned to Robert Chen. He maintained his composure, but Daniel saw the flash of anger before he suppressed it. "That's a serious accusation," Robert said carefully. "It's a serious situation," Victoria replied. "Someone is attempting to destroy my reputation and Mr. Carter's career using fabricated evidence. I'd call that corporate sabotage, wouldn't you?" "I'd call it speculation until proven otherwise." "Then let's prove it otherwise." Patricia has prepared a brief on email forensics and the legal consequences of document forgery. Perhaps the board should review it before accepting any communications as authentic. Victoria's smile was ice. After all, we wouldn't want to make decisions based on fraudulent information. That would be embarrassing for everyone involved. The chess match was beautiful to watch. Victoria had turned Robert's own weapon against him, making it impossible for him to present the forged emails without inviting immediate scrutiny. If he pushed forward, he'd have to explain how he obtained them, why he didn't question their authenticity, and why he was so eager to believe the worst about his CEO. Harold Chen cleared his throat. "I think we need to see these emails and conduct a proper investigation before drawing any conclusions. In the meantime, I see no reason to question Ms. Hale's leadership or Mr. Carter's qualifications based on what we've heard today. The Castellano decision appears sound, the hiring process was appropriate, and any allegations of impropriety seem to be unsubstantiated. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough." The board agreed to continue the investigation into the email forgeries while tabling any action against Victoria or Daniel. Robert Chen left the meeting looking like a man who'd just watched his carefully constructed strategy collapse. After the board members filed out, Patricia pulled Victoria and Daniel aside. "That went better than I expected. Harold Chen's always been fair-minded, and you gave him enough cover to dismiss Robert's attacks without looking politically motivated. Robert's not done, Victoria said. He'll regroup, find another angle. But we bought ourselves time. And you made him look petty and vindictive, Daniel added. That matters. The board saw him pushing unverified allegations while we presented facts and analysis. That contrast works in our favor. Victoria nodded, but Daniel could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The adrenaline that had carried her through the presentation was fading, leaving behind the toll of putting herself out there, defending herself publicly, risking everything on honesty. You should go home, Daniel said quietly. Get some rest. You were incredible in there, but you don't need to prove anything more today. I have work that can wait. Please, Victoria. You've been running on empty for days. Take the afternoon. That's not a suggestion from an employee. That's a request from a friend. Something in her expression softened. A friend? Yeah. If that's okay? Victoria was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay. But you're taking the afternoon too. Spend it with Lily. You've earned it. They left together, and in the elevator down to the parking garage, Victoria said, She still wants me to come to dinner on Friday? She insisted I ask you today, said you'd need something nice to look forward to after the big meeting. Victoria laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. She's wiser than most of my executive team. She really is. So is that a yes? It's a yes. What time? 6:30. Fair warning, Lily will have prepared conversation topics. She takes dinner guests very seriously. I'll bring my A game. Victoria paused as they reached her car. Daniel? Thank you for standing with me today, for not running when things got complicated, for being exactly the kind of person I hoped you were when I hired you. Thank you for giving me the chance to be that person. I'd forgotten who I was before all this. You reminded me. They parted ways, and Daniel drove home feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone trying to survive, but the grounded, confident hope of someone who'd faced a challenge and discovered they were stronger than they thought. Lily was delighted when he picked her up early from daycare. Did you win? She asked immediately. We told the truth, Daniel replied, and that's more important than winning. But did the truth win? Daniel considered the question. I think it's winning. It might take a while, but yeah, I think the truth is going to win. They spent the afternoon at the aquarium, the trip he'd promised her weeks ago, finally made real. Lily pressed her face against the glass of the shark tank, utterly fearless, completely mesmerized. Daniel watched her wonder and thought about courage, about how his daughter approached the world with such open-hearted bravery, while he'd spent years hiding, making himself small, choosing safety over authenticity. Daddy, look! Lily pointed at a massive hammerhead gliding past. He's not scary. He's beautiful. You're right. He's beautiful. Everyone thinks sharks are mean, but they're just being sharks. That's what the guide said. They're just living their lives. Daniel thought about that observation as they moved through the exhibits. How much of what frightened him was actually dangerous versus simply unfamiliar? How many times had he chosen invisibility over visibility because he assumed being seen meant being vulnerable to attack? Victoria had chosen visibility today. She'd stood in front of the board and claimed her truth, refused to let shame or fear silence her. She'd been magnificent. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Daniel opened his laptop to find an email from Patricia. The forensic analysis of the forged emails had begun, and preliminary findings confirmed what they suspected. The metadata was inconsistent, the language patterns didn't match Victoria's communication style, and the timestamps revealed impossibilities. Someone with high-level system access had created these documents and planted them in the email servers. Robert Chen's access credentials appeared in the audit logs for each of the dates the emails were created. Patricia's message was brief. We have him. Question is whether we use this immediately or hold it in reserve. Thoughts? Daniel forwarded the email to Victoria with a note. Your call, but whatever you decide, I support it. Her response came within minutes. We hold it. Let him think he got away with it. When he makes his next move, we'll be ready with proof of the first attack. Strategic patience. V smart, Daniel thought. Let Robert believe his forgery went undetected. Let him get overconfident. Make another attempt. Then reveal everything at once. demonstrating a pattern of deliberate sabotage rather than a single desperate act. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "I'm nervous about Friday. What if Lily doesn't like me?" Daniel smiled at the message, at the vulnerability beneath the question. "She'll love you. Just be yourself. The real you, not the CEO armor. What if the real me is boring? The real you survived things that would have broken most people, built a successful company from nothing, and stands up for what's right even when it costs you. That's the opposite of boring." A long pause, then, "See you Friday." "And Daniel, thank you for seeing me, the real me. It means more than you know." Daniel set down his phone and allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened over the past 2 weeks. He'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from isolated to connected, from surviving to actually living. And somewhere along the way, he'd found something unexpected, a friendship with someone who understood the cost of strength, who knew what it meant to keep functioning when everything inside was breaking, who needed someone to see her humanity as much as he needed to remember his own. Friday arrived with surprising swiftness. Daniel left work at 5, stopping at the grocery store for ingredients for Sarah's famous chicken recipe. Lily met him at the door, vibrating with excitement. "Is she really coming? Your boss, the lonely lady? She's really coming. And Lily? Her name is Victoria. You can call her that." "Victoria," Lily repeated, testing the name. "That's pretty. Is she pretty too?" "She is. But more importantly, she's kind and smart and going through some hard things right now. So we're going to make her feel welcome, okay?" "I'm good at making people feel welcome," Lily said confidently. "I'll show her my drawings and my room and my collection of interesting rocks." "That sounds perfect." They cooked together, following Sarah's recipe card with its familiar handwriting, its grease-stained corners and margin notes. Daniel felt his wife's presence in the kitchen as he taught Lily how to season the chicken just right, how to chop vegetables safely, how to create something nourishing and beautiful from simple ingredients. Victoria arrived at 6:30 exactly, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking uncharacteristically nervous. She'd dressed casually, jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes even more striking, but her uncertainty was palpable. Lily answered the door before Daniel could reach it. "Hi, I'm Lily. Are you Victoria?" "I am, and these are for you." Victoria handed her the flowers. "Your dad told me you like bright colors." Lily's face lit up. "They're beautiful. Come in. I'm going to put these in water, and then I'm going to show you everything." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Victoria and Daniel alone in the entryway. "She has your energy," Victoria said, smiling. "She has her mother's fearlessness." Daniel took Victoria's coat. "Thank you for coming. I know this probably feels weird." "It feels nice, actually. Normal. I can't remember the last time I had dinner at someone's home." Victoria followed him into the living room, taking in the modest space, the worn furniture, the bookshelves crammed with children's books and Sarah's old favorites, the photos on the walls capturing a life built from love and loss. Lily returned with the flowers arranged in a vase, placed them proudly on the dining table, and proceeded to give Victoria a comprehensive tour of the apartment. Daniel watched from the kitchen as his daughter explained her artwork, her rock collection, her favorite books. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking genuine questions, sitting cross-legged on the floor of Lily's room to examine a particularly interesting fossil. "My mom gave me that," Lily said, holding up a small amethyst, "before she got really sick. She said it would remind me that beautiful things come from pressure and time." Victoria's expression grew soft. "Your mom was very wise." "Daddy says you're going through hard things too, like we did when Mom was sick." Daniel nearly intervened, but Victoria handled it with surprising grace. "I am," she said honestly. "Sometimes being a grown-up is really hard, but having friends helps. Your dad's been a good friend to me." "He's good at that. He takes care of people." Lily paused. "You should come to dinner more. Then you won't be lonely." "I'd like that very much." They sat down to dinner at 7, and the conversation flowed more easily than Daniel had anticipated. Lily asked Victoria about her favorite foods, her childhood, whether she preferred cats or dogs. Victoria answered everything honestly, sharing stories about growing up in Boston, her first job washing dishes at a restaurant, the time she'd accidentally dyed her hair green in college. "You're funny," Lily announced halfway through the meal, I thought bosses were always serious. I'm serious at work, Victoria admitted. But this isn't work. This is dinner with friends. I can be regular Victoria here. I like regular Victoria, Lily said decisively. After dinner, while Lily worked on a puzzle in the living room, Daniel and Victoria cleaned up together. They moved around the small kitchen with surprising ease, falling into a rhythm of washing and drying, storing and organizing. Thank you for this, Victoria said quietly. I didn't realize how much I needed it, just being somewhere warm and real and uncomplicated. Thank you for coming, for being vulnerable enough to let us in. Daniel handed her a plate to dry. Lily's right, you know. You should come back, make this a regular thing. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're participating. There's a difference. Daniel paused. I've been thinking about what you said about being alone, about how work consumed everything else. I don't want that for you, and selfishly, I don't want it for me either. We both need to remember there's life outside the office. Maybe we can remind each other. Victoria set down the dish towel and looked at him directly. Is this still just about work? Us working together? Being professional colleagues? Daniel considered the question carefully. I think it's more than that. I think we're becoming friends, real friends, the kind who show up for each other, who tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, who make space in their lives for connection. He met her gaze. Is that okay with you? It's more than okay, it's... Victoria stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I haven't had a real friend in years, people I work with, people I negotiate with, people who want something from me. But not friends. Not people who just want to know me. Well, now you do. You've got me and Lily. We're your family if you'll have us. Victoria's eyes grew bright. Family? The chosen kind. The kind that shows up with flowers and listens to 6-year-olds talk about rocks and doesn't judge you for being human. That kind of family. I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at letting people in. You're doing it right now. You showed up, you were honest with Lily, you're standing in my kitchen talking about real things instead of hiding behind professional distance. That's letting people in. That's being brave enough to connect. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding up a completed puzzle. Look, I finished it. Victoria, come see. They spent the rest of the evening in the living room, working on puzzles, looking at photo albums, telling stories. Lily showed Victoria pictures of Sarah, and instead of the awkwardness Daniel feared, it felt natural. Victoria asked questions about Sarah's life, her passions, her personality. She honored Daniel's late wife by being genuinely curious about her, by acknowledging that her absence mattered, by making space for both grief and celebration. At 9 o'clock, Lily started yawning. Do you have to go? She asked Victoria. I should. It's getting late and you have school tomorrow. But you'll come back? I promise. Lily hugged her with the fierce, unselfconscious affection of childhood. I'm glad you're not lonely anymore. Victoria hugged her back and Daniel saw tears in her eyes when Lily finally let go. Me too, sweetheart. After Lily was in bed, Daniel walked Victoria to the door. They stood in the hallway, neither quite ready to end the evening. Your daughter is extraordinary, Victoria said. She is. Gets that from her mother, too. I think she gets a lot from you, the kindness, the empathy, the ability to see people as they really are. I'm trying to be the kind of parent Sarah would be proud of, the kind of person, honestly. Victoria reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. You are. She would be so proud. They stood there for a moment, hands linked, acknowledging something neither of them had words for yet. Not romance. It was too soon, too complicated, too weighted with professional considerations. But connection, recognition, the beginning of something that mattered. See you Monday, Victoria said finally. See you Monday. She left, and Daniel closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. From down the hall, Lily called out, Daddy, I really like Victoria. Can she be part of our family for real? Daniel smiled in the darkness. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she already is. Outside, Victoria sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine. She'd walked into that apartment expecting awkwardness and obligation. Instead, she'd found warmth and acceptance, and the unfamiliar sensation of being welcomed exactly as she was. No performance required, no armor necessary, just human connection in its simplest, most profound form. She pulled out her phone and texted Daniel. Thank you for tonight. I forgot what it felt like to be part of something real. V. His response came quickly. You belong here. Don't forget that. See you Monday, friend. Friend. The words settled over her like a benediction. Victoria Hale, who'd spent 20 years building walls around her heart, who'd sacrificed relationships for success, who'd convinced herself that loneliness was the price of leadership. She had a friend. A real friend who saw her completely and didn't turn away. She started the car and drove home through the city lights, feeling lighter than she had in years. Whatever battles waited at Meridian, whatever moves Robert Chen planned next, she wouldn't face them alone anymore. That changed everything. Monday morning brought the reckoning everyone had anticipated. Robert Chen called for an emergency board session, claiming he had new evidence of misconduct that couldn't wait for the formal investigation to conclude. But Patricia Morrison was ready, and when the board convened at 10 o'clock, she walked in carrying a file that would change everything. Before Mr. Chen presents his evidence, Patricia said calmly, I believe the board should review these forensic findings regarding the email communications in question. She distributed copies of the technical analysis, timestamps that proved impossibility, metadata showing system administrator access from Robert's credentials, language pattern analysis demonstrating the emails couldn't have come from Victoria. The evidence was irrefutable and damning. Harold Chen studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Robert, these logs show your access credentials were used to create the allegedly incriminating emails. Do you have an explanation? Robert's composure finally cracked. Those logs could have been manipulated. Anyone with sufficient access could have what? Framed you by using your credentials to commit corporate fraud? Patricia's voice was ice. The same credentials you've been using to access confidential personnel files, strategic planning documents, and privileged communications between Ms. Hale and her legal counsel. All documented here, all unauthorized, all violations of corporate policy and potentially criminal statutes. The room went silent. Robert looked around the table, searching for allies, and found none. Even his supporters recognized a lost cause when they saw one. I was protecting this company, Robert said, his voice tight with anger. Victoria's judgment has been compromised. Her mental instability, her inappropriate relationship with Carter, someone needed to expose the truth. The truth, Victoria said quietly, standing, is that you've spent weeks manufacturing evidence, violating privacy laws, and committing corporate espionage because you disagreed with a business decision. Not because I was wrong. Patricia's legal team and Daniel's analysis both confirmed the Castellano termination was correct, but because you couldn't accept that I made a choice that didn't align with your priorities. She walked to the window, then turned back to face the board. I want to address something Robert said. He mentioned mental instability. He's referring to the fact that I manage anxiety and depression, medical conditions that millions of people navigate while leading successful lives and careers. I've never hidden this from HR or from the executives who need to know. I manage it responsibly with medication and therapy, and it has never compromised my judgment or performance. Harold Chen leaned forward. Victoria, you don't need to disclose medical information. I know, but I choose to, because Robert's trying to weaponize my humanity, and I refuse to be ashamed of being human. I have mental health challenges. I also have a track record of growing this company, making sound strategic decisions, and prioritizing ethics over expedience. Those things coexist. And if this board believes that managing a medical condition disqualifies me from leadership, then perhaps I'm working for the wrong organization. The challenge hung in the air. Harold looked around the table, gauging reactions. Finally, he said, I think I speak for the entire board when I say your health is your private matter, managed responsibly. What concerns us is corporate sabotage, fraudulent documentation, and abuse of access privileges. Robert, you're suspended pending a full investigation. If these findings are confirmed, we'll be pursuing both termination and legal action. Robert stood abruptly. This is a mistake. You're choosing her emotional instability over my 20 years of service. We're choosing integrity over sabotage, Harold interrupted. Please leave. Security will escort you. Robert left, his face dark with fury, and the room collectively exhaled. Harold turned to Victoria. I owe you an apology. We should have questioned Robert's allegations more critically from the start. Instead, we allow doubt to cloud our judgment about your leadership. Thank you, Harold. That means a lot. The Castellano decision, looking at the full analysis Daniel provided, it was absolutely the right call. Painful, but right. And I want you to know that this board supports you, not despite your humanity, but because of it. We need leaders who make ethical choices even when they're costly. You've proven that's exactly who you are. After the meeting, Victoria and Daniel stood in her office, processing what had just happened. The threat was over. Robert was finished. Their reputations were intact. "We did it," Daniel said, still somewhat disbelieving. "We actually did it. You did it. The analysis, the courage to stand by it, the refusal to back down when Robert attacked, that was all you." Victoria sat down heavily, and for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely relaxed. "I couldn't have fought this battle without you." "Partners," Daniel said. "That's what we are, partners who have each other's backs." "Partners," Victoria agreed. "And friends. Don't forget friends." Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your victory. Some of us have been waiting a long time to see Robert Chen get what he deserves. You have more allies on this board than you realize." A friend Victoria showed the message to Daniel. "Apparently we're not as alone as we thought." "We were never alone. We just didn't realize it until we stopped hiding." Over the following weeks, things settled into a new normal. Robert Chen was formally terminated, and the board launched reforms to prevent similar abuses of power. Victoria's transparency about her mental health sparked conversations throughout the company about wellness, support systems, and the destructive culture of presenteeism and invulnerability. Several executives privately thanked her for speaking openly, sharing their own struggles with anxiety, depression, and burnout. Daniel's position was formalized and expanded. He hired an assistant, built a small team, and continued providing strategic analysis that proved invaluable to Victoria's decision-making. But more importantly, he'd learned to balance work with life, to be present for Lily while also pursuing meaningful professional challenges. And every Friday evening, Victoria came to dinner. She became a fixture in their small family, someone Lily counted on, someone who showed up consistently and genuinely. They cooked together, played games, talked about everything and nothing. Victoria learned to braid Lily's hair, helped with homework, attended school presentations and soccer games. She became Aunt Victoria, the chosen family member who filled a space none of them had realized was empty. 3 months after the board confrontation, Victoria and Daniel sat on a park bench watching Lily play with other children. The afternoon sun painted everything golden, and the air smelled of autumn leaves and possibility. "I've been thinking about something," Victoria said. "About what you said that first week, that I'd spent 20 years building an empire at the expense of everything else. You were right. I had become exactly what my mother feared, successful and completely alone." "But you're not alone anymore." "No, I'm not. And I've been wondering what else might be possible if I stop defining myself entirely by work. If I make space for other things, relationships, hobbies, a life that exists outside Meridian's walls." Daniel smiled. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. That's the terrifying part. I've spent so long knowing exactly who I am and what I want professionally. But personally, I have no idea what brings me joy outside of quarterly earnings and successful negotiations." "Then we'll figure it out together. Try things. Fail at some of them. Discover what makes you happy." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm happy right now. Sitting here with you, watching Lily play, having nowhere else I need to be. This feels like enough." "Then this is a good start." Lily ran over, breathless and excited. "Victoria, come push me on the swings. You push better than Daddy." "I heard that," Daniel called after them as Victoria let Lily drag her toward the playground. He watched them together, his daughter and his closest friend, laughing and soaring through the air, and felt something shift in his chest. For 3 years, he'd been surviving, going through the motions, doing what was necessary, protecting himself and Lily from further loss by refusing to risk connection. But Victoria had changed that. She'd pulled him out of isolation, reminded him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, showed him that being seen could be a gift rather than a threat. And he'd done the same for her, given her a safe place to be human, shown her that leadership didn't require invulnerability, offered friendship without agenda or expectation. They'd saved each other, really. Two broken people who'd found connection in the margins of corporate warfare and discovered that healing often required the courage to let someone else see your wounds. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on his small balcony with cups of tea, looking out at the city lights. "I got an interesting call today," Victoria said, "from a headhunter. There's a CEO position opening at a competitor. Larger company, better compensation, opportunity to build something even bigger than Meridian." Daniel's chest tightened. "Are you considering it?" 6 months ago, I would have jumped at it. Bigger challenge, more prestige, chance to prove myself on an even larger stage. But now, she trailed off, staring into her tea. Now I'm asking different questions. Would I have time for Friday dinners? Would I miss Lily's soccer games? Would I lose the life I'm finally building outside of work? What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. But honestly, Daniel, I don't want to think about it. I want to stay where I am. Keep working with you. Keep being part of Lily's life. Keep learning how to be human instead of just being a CEO. Relief flooded through him. Then tell them no. Oh, just like that? Turn down a bigger opportunity? It's only bigger if you measure it by money and prestige. By other metrics, happiness, connection, balance, staying here might be the bigger opportunity. Victoria smiled. When did you get so wise? When I started listening to my 6-year-old daughter. She's the one who told me work isn't more important than the people we love. She's the one who saw you were lonely and invited you into our family. She understands what matters better than most adults ever will. She gets that from you. She gets it from Sarah, and from having experienced real loss. She knows life is short and precious, and that the moments we spend with people who matter are what we'll remember at the end. Victoria set down her tea and looked at him directly. I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, okay? Don't respond, don't analyze, just hear me. Daniel nodded. These past few months, working with you, becoming part of your family, learning how to live instead of just survive, it's changed everything for me. I look forward to Fridays more than I look forward to board meetings. I care more about Lily's soccer scores than quarterly projections. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being my employee or even just my friend. You became someone I can't imagine my life without. She took a breath. I'm not saying this to pressure you or complicate things. I just need you to know that you matter to me, both of you. You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever have, a family. People who see me completely and choose to stay anyway. And I'm grateful for that, more grateful than I can express. Daniel let the words settle between them, understanding the courage they required, the vulnerability they represented. Victoria Hale, who'd spent 20 years protecting her heart, had just offered it to him with both hands. I need to tell you something too, he said finally. Sarah's been gone for 3 years, and for 3 years I've been honoring her memory by refusing to fully live. I told myself I was protecting Lily, being responsible, not risking our stability on uncertain things like connection and happiness. But really, I was scared. Scared of losing someone else, scared of being vulnerable, scared of caring about someone new. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You changed that, not by pushing or demanding or trying to replace Sarah, but by showing me that it's possible to honor the past while still choosing the present, that I can miss Sarah and still make space for new relationships, that loving someone new doesn't diminish what we had. It honors it by proving I'm still capable of connection. Victoria's eyes were bright in the darkness. What are you saying? I'm saying you matter to me too. I'm saying Lily's right. You're part of our family now. And I'm saying that maybe, someday, when the timing is right, and we've both healed a little more, there might be room for something beyond friendship. If you wanted that. If I wanted that. Which I think I do. Someday. Someday, Victoria repeated softly. I like someday. It's patient and honest and doesn't require us to rush into something we're not ready for. Exactly. Someday we'll figure out what this is. But for now, for today, we're friends, partners, family. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, feeling the weight of what they'd acknowledged without the pressure of having to act on it immediately. There would be time for exploration, for discovering whether friendship could evolve into something deeper. But that time wasn't now. Now was for healing, for building trust, for learning how to be whole people instead of broken ones desperately clinging to each other. 6 months later, on a spring afternoon bright with promise, Daniel and Victoria stood in Meridian's conference room presenting a revolutionary new corporate wellness initiative. It included mental health resources, flexible work arrangements, support groups for employees managing chronic conditions, and a company culture that valued humanity over performative invulnerability. "We're not just building a company," Victoria told the assembled executives. "We're building a community, a place where people can bring their whole selves to work, struggles included, and still be valued and supported. Because the truth is, we're all carrying something, and we're all stronger when we don't have to carry it alone." The initiative passed unanimously. And that evening, at their regular Friday dinner, Lily made an announcement. "I think we should get a dog." Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances across the table. "A dog is a big responsibility," Daniel said carefully. "I know, but we're a family now, all three of us. And families should have dogs. It's basically a rule." "Is it?" Victoria asked, fighting a smile. "It is. I checked." Lily's expression was entirely serious. "Plus, Victoria's at our house all the time anyway. She might as well live here officially and help take care of the dog." The suggestion hung in the air. They'd been dancing around the idea of Victoria moving in for weeks now. She stayed over several nights a week, kept clothes in Daniel's closet, had her own toothbrush in the bathroom. But neither of them had been quite ready to make it official, to acknowledge that somewhere along the way, friendship had deepened into something more. "What do you think?" Daniel asked Victoria. "Ready to officially join this crazy household?" "And get a dog?" Victoria added. "And get a dog," Lily confirmed. "A big one that can go hiking with us." Victoria looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw everything she'd been missing for 20 years reflected back. Acceptance, partnership, love that didn't require her to be anything other than herself. And she saw Sarah there too, in Lily's smile and Daniel's kindness, a presence that blessed rather than haunted, that made space for new love instead of preventing it. "Yes," Victoria said. "I'm ready for all of it. The household, the dog, the hiking, the family, all of it." Lily cheered and Daniel reached across the table to take Victoria's hand. They'd started as strangers thrown together by accident, his unintended witness to her vulnerability, her unexpected recognition of his hidden competence. They'd survived corporate warfare and personal demons and the hard work of learning to trust again. And now they were choosing each other. Deliberately, carefully, with full knowledge of each other's scars and strengths. They were building something real from the wreckage of their separate losses. A family forged not by blood but by choice. Not by perfection, but by showing up for each other even when it was hard. That night, after Lily was asleep and the dinner dishes were cleaned, Daniel and Victoria stood on the balcony looking at the stars. "I never thought I'd have this again," Daniel said quietly. "A partner, a future that looks like something other than just survival." "I never thought I'd have it at all," Victoria replied. "I'd convinced myself that love and leadership couldn't coexist, that I had to choose between success and connection. Turns out you can have both. You just need the courage to be vulnerable enough to let people in. And the luck to find people worth letting in." Victoria leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They fit together perfectly, two pieces that hadn't known they were incomplete until they found each other. "Sarah would have liked you," Daniel said. "She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me, who wouldn't let me hide, someone strong enough to call out my nonsense and kind enough to do it with love. I wish I could have known her." "You do know her. She's in Lily's courage and compassion. She's in the values we're teaching together. She's part of this family too, just in a different way." Victoria nodded, understanding. "Then I'm honored to be part of something she helped create. And I promise to take care of both of you, to show up, to be honest, to choose this family every single day. That's all anyone can promise. And it's everything." They stood together under the stars, two people who'd learned that strength wasn't about invulnerability, but about having the courage to be seen. Who'd discovered that leadership didn't require sacrificing humanity, but embracing it. Who'd found that sometimes the most unexpected accidents led to the most intentional choices. Daniel had walked into Victoria's office that Thursday morning expecting nothing more than to deliver quarterly projections. Instead, He'd witnessed a moment of raw humanity that changed everything. He'd seen a powerful woman at her most vulnerable and chosen compassion over exploitation. And in that choice, he'd found his way back to himself, back to the man who stood up for what was right, who chose courage over comfort, who understood that being seen could be a gift instead of a threat. Victoria had started that morning alone, terrified of exposure, convinced that vulnerability meant destruction. And she'd ended it with a partnership that would transform her life, someone who saw her completely and stayed, who reminded her that leadership and humanity weren't opposing forces, who showed her that family could be chosen and love could be rebuilt from broken pieces. They'd saved each other in the moment that mattered most, and now they were choosing to keep saving each other, every single day, through small acts of courage and large gestures of commitment. The invisible man had become visible. The lonely CEO had found family. And together, with a 6-year-old girl and a future dog as their co-conspirators in joy, they were building a life that honored the past while embracing the present. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And that made it exactly right.